Board of Supervisors for our March 20th, 2007 Board of Supervisors meeting. Roberta, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Long?
Here.
Supervisor Foy?
Here.
Supervisor Bennett?
Here.
Supervisor Flynn?
Here.
Supervisor Parks?
I'm here also. I'd like to now go to Mr. Johnston in terms of agenda review. I know that we don't have anyone here for item 3 to come speak at the moment of affirmation, so I'm going to ask that we remove that one.
I had a card.
Generally, it's a time when we have someone come and open our meetings. It's not a public comment type of item. So because we have no one to speak on it, I'm going to ask that we continue it to our next meeting.
Anything on the agenda that folks can speak to?
But this is going to be taken off the agenda. At least that's what I would request. Thank you. Any objections to that change in the agenda? Seeing none, then we'll go to, and you had nothing either, Mr. Johnston?
Well, I doesn't have to amend the agenda, but I just wanted to tell the board that I'm asking that item 35 be continued to give my office a little more time to review. This is the tax sale property.
Okay.
Yeah, but when it hit the agenda, I, for whatever reasons, I was out of the office. I haven't had a
Okay.
chance.
So
to look it
you'd
over.
like 35 continued to our next meeting?
Well, I like it continued, and I'll bring it back either
Okay.
next meeting. I only have till tomorrow for the next agenda. So
Okay.
I'll need at least 2 weeks.
Do we have a motion to continue item 35? We have a motion, second, no objection on that, then 35 also will be continued. Thank you. We have the pleasure of having a Girl Scout troop here because this is also the 46th anniversary, oh, that's, that's the Peace Corps. It's March 11th through 17th is Girl Scouts Make the World a Better Place Week. And so for that, we have the pleasure of having Girl Scout Troop 462 and Troop 515 here this morning, and they're going to come up to the podium, and they're going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So come on, ladies.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ladies. And they generally carry in the flag, but our flags are very big and heavy. And so when they get older and become Girl Scout gold medal winners, they'll come back and hold the flags for us too. We also have a 9:30 time certain, so I think we have some representation for that from the Girl Scouts. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda are our consent agenda items, and these are items 10 through 16, and I know we do have a card on one of them. Does anyone else have any agenda items they want to pull out from those?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to make a comment on item 10, not pull it out, just make a comment.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll have the public comment
Sure.
card then. Mr. Williams?
Am I going to speak on 16?
Yes. Consent agenda items are agenda items 10 through 16. So.
Carol Dean Williams, a 61-year resident. This is a similar item that was on a couple weeks ago that showed that less revenues came in than went out. The obvious is, where does the money come from to make up that difference, and how much interest is charged on that, because it has to be borrowed from somewhere. So could we get an answer to that? Because this is the same item. Thank you.
Thank you. And our treasurer is here for you this morning, so you can get your answer. Thank you. Back then to the board on those items. I know 10 you wanted to speak on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to speak on this just to say that, and Supervisor Foy, this is something that years ago was starting to be a significant issue for us countywide, both in the escalating cost and the delivery of service. And there was a lot of good work done by many people, Human Services Agency, working with the Area Agency on Aging. And I just, in looking at this report, was very pleased to see that the end result is that we have significant system now of delivery of senior nutrition programs and funding streams that really support that, so that they are countywide, and we have, as you see, a lot of partners who now work with us to deliver that. And it is a much improved and appreciated system as a result of work a few years ago on it. So just to make note of that for the Area Agency on Aging, to thank them for their excellent work on it.
Yeah, and additionally, all the other agencies that stepped up to the plate to help us in providing the Meals on Wheels and congregate care, congregate food serving. So that worked out really good. A lot of the cities came on board willingly. That was wonderful. So any other items on the consent agenda that we'd like to have discussed? No? Okay.
One.
Yes.
I don't know if we have anybody here from Public Works.
Yes, Alex.
Oh, I was just making a comment on where you had, I saw in 12, you had all the different projects that you're working on. And a lot of these are in the middle of stuff, and they're all ongoing. And I was just curious, knowing from some of my large builders and contractors and stuff, we're seeing some pricing start to reduce. I noticed last time we were here, we talked about we had, instead of just a couple proposals, we ended up with a whole bunch, somebody from Bakersfield and everything else. Is there an opportunity for some renegotiation on some of these pricing, or have you started to see pricing reduce?
First of all, Alec Pring with Public Works Agency. The contracts that are on this monthly tabulation are contracts that have already been awarded, so there isn't an opportunity to renegotiate those, but we're certainly seeing more bids on contracts, which is hopeful that contractors will sharpen their pencil and will get better prices down the line.
Okay. All right. So okay, that's what I've been seeing from a lot of the different people I've dealt with, that some of them have, I don't know if you have it in your contract, I have some of them, especially the big home builders, who are going back to their subs and saying, we already had a contract, let's renegotiate this. And some of these large builders that are doing, 50, 100 million is having to cut 5 and 10% out of those numbers. But you probably have some non-negotiable contracts once you've made those contracts. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir. Once they've been awarded, then you can't go back and renegotiate the contract.
Okay, great. But I'm sure, like I said, sharpen the pencil is going to be available.
Yes, sir.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe we'll actually see some come in below our estimates. All right. With that, then, let's go ahead and have...
Say something
yes.
to that. If they do, excuse me, come in below, we have to look for change orders further down.
Do we have a motion, then, to accept the consent items 10 through 16? Motion and second. Seeing no objections, and that passes. Now is our time for public comments. And this is for anything that's not appearing on the agenda.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I think we jumped over 5, the minutes.
Aha. And we actually have them before us, too.
So I'd like to move the minutes of February 6th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. No objections. That passes. Thank you, Supervisor Long.
Sure.
Public comments, again, this is for items that are not appearing on the agenda, such as the one of moment of affirmation. That's no longer on the agenda. And Mr. Carol Dean Williams, you wanted to speak?
Carol Dean Williams, a 61-year resident. I noticed our ex-supervisor made the newspaper again, so I just happened to have some thoughts. Horse up since. That other former supervisor from Simi Valley lacked horse up sense. She championed the board's agenda as if it was Deadwood Alley. She said Carol Dean Williams had too much horse up sense. He has to be stopped speaking to agenda in sequence. Cowboy howdy sense. 5 minutes in penitence. Well, there was still voters who gave her 28%. She said, Carol Dean Williams, we're bridling you in. Skirts howdy, a wild Mustang can't be fenced in. But Supervisor Flynn reminded her of her sin. That same 28% done her in. She said, Carol Dean Williams, this act will pastor you. Well, we can all see that she was full of bull blank too. Cowboy howdy horse up sense. That other supervisor from Simi Valley was blinded by what was up this cowboy's alley. Boss up, supervisors. Every trail has a head, has a boss, except Ventura County supervisors. They are a working double cross. Double cross the voters, that's the trail of office. Bull blank 'em up. Who can refuse that offer? Boss up, supervisors, no one in charge. Skirt howdy, it takes 3 votes to get a little asphalt from the maintenance yard. Potholes the size of horses' feet. Every cow trail in the county has better maintenance than voters get from their county seat. Boss up, supervisors, which 3 are in charge? Every trailhead starts with a begin to the stocking yard. Double cross the voters, waste taxpayer funds, deck the halls with pearls and diamonds. Every trail has a head, has a boss. These 7 verses are like the horns of the bull. They get the point across. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker card is Mr. Bob Braitman.
It will not be in verse. Dear members of the board, I was here about 5 weeks ago to inform your board about the 17th annual trivia challenge sponsored by the Ventura South Rotary Club, and to invite each of you to sponsor a team to raise funds for the county's adult literacy program. The event was held last Wednesday. Great time was had by all. More than 20 teams were entered, and a successful event. There were 3 categories: Rotary teams, high school teams, and community teams. Now, the county's adult literacy program is an excellent service for individuals involved for and benefits our entire society. I'm pleased to present today, on behalf of Rotary, I'd like to ask your county librarian, Jackie Griffin, and your adult literacy program administrator, Carol Chapman, to just join me here for a moment. This is a check for $3,500, which represents the funds that were generated last Wednesday, and that's for your adult literacy program.
Thank you.
Now, but wait, there's more. There's more. I'm also here to present the first place award to in the community division to a team of 3 individuals, all of whom are Ventura County employees, and they have the most correct answers of any team. Those individuals are all named John, which was not one of the trivia questions. Johnny Johnson, your county executive, your deputy county counsel, John Polich, and your chief deputy executive officer, John Nickel. I'm here to present them with their awards.
What, did you say John Nickel?
McNichol.
John Nicole. He does look after the nickels, so.
Now, last, I do have a trivia question for your board. How will next year's trivia challenge be different than this year's contest?
I'll have a team.
The answer,
more supervisors.
The answer.
Yes, I will be available if you'll tell us in advance. So.
The answer. Since no county supervisor entered the team this year, we decided on a new category next year. County Supervisor Division, with a nice award to the county supervisor team that has the most correct answers compared to the other county supervisor teams. So start thinking about who you'd like on your team next year. It's a terrific event. It's a terrific program the county runs. And congratulations to the county.
I'd like to let Supervisor Long know I've already drafted Johnny Johnson, John Nicole. for my team, so hands off. You can't rate them without my permission, right?
Thank you.
I want to thank my teammates and announce that John Polich gets the Most Valuable Player award. the other two of us managed to get him to the right place. He came up with most of the.
Okay, he's on my team.
I wasn't going to do this, but I got to. They only had 2 more correct answers than the team sponsored by Braitman and Associates. It was a close contest.
We knew you had to work that in there, Bob. Right. I want to thank Mr. Braitman for being involved in it, but also for just adding that spirit of fun to the whole process also. So, I mean, fundraising can be dull sometimes, and that's certainly not a dull one. So thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for making the county one of your benefactors.
And also Mr. Matheny, who is the MC, who really made the whole night lively. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
And thank you to
Matheny.
Rotary South.
Thank you. Oh, all right. That concludes our public comments, and we'll now go to our board comments. And let's start from the left and go to the right this morning. Supervisor Flynn.
May I hold off?
You
In
want
case
to?
someone asks me questions.
Okay.
Well, I'll hold off, too, in case someone asks me questions.
Supervisor Foy.
I'll just say something. I'd like to adjourn in these people that passed away in my district. Also, a couple other things. Last week, we had another meeting on the 118 task force. It was held at my office. We're making progress on making that safe for the years to come, and I want to thank you, Kathy, for your participation in that, people. And we're working with assembly members to write some legislation to continue the safety side of this and increase enforcement on that highway, which has worked pretty well. At our urging, the CHP has assigned additional resources to that, and we remain committed to this effort to stop deaths and injuries there. So it's worked out pretty well so far. We only had 14 accidents in the last few months. They're also going to end up with I think almost 1,000 hours extra of enforcement on that highway. They've also looked at adding more to the way station and everything else to protect it. So there's a lot to do there, but it is one of our deadliest highways. Do you make a comment on that? Oh, no, okay. All right, and so we're working on that. The other thing I want to say, congratulations to the Moore Park Academic Decathlon team. You probably saw that they ended up third to stand out this last weekend. There's some smart kids out there, you know. I think even, John, in your district, you had some kids that did great, too. It's great to see our kids doing well statewide. Well, hopefully maybe be able to bring them before the board sometime and congratulate them publicly. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Long, did you want to wait also? Okay.
Yeah, I have no questions for any other supervisors.
Okay.
I have no questions for Supervisor Flynn.
Where do you want to go?
Let's start again on the left and see if we can get through.
I feel comfortable being on the left here. Let me though first ask the board to adjourn in memory of the people on my list, which I'll submit to the board, and a Ventura County firefighter, the information officer for the Ventura County Fire District, has passed away. His name is Joe Luna. He was very friendly to all of us in Oxnard, including Elizabeth, who is sitting out there, and her husband, Fred. We were so sad to see him pass away right after he retired. And we visited him in UCLA Hospital, and we knew he was really struggling. But I remember him as a vibrant individual, leader in our community of Oxnard, and one who would share himself and all of his qualities with others, including driving a fire truck to Tenaya, Mexico, which is in the state of Jalisco. And he did that after I purchased the truck. So he drove the truck along with another firefighter clear to Tenaya, presented it to the community. But we'll remember Joe Luna for many things. And, I thank you for allowing me to make those comments. Yesterday I did have a news conference, in case you hadn't heard. The issues are for me are tremendous. It seemed the only recourse that I had. If I have to go to the highest mountain in Ventura and grandstand to speak for and behalf of people who don't have enough money to put in the sewer system, then that's what I'm going to do. So some of the issues raised as I read them in the newspaper, on December the 9th, 2003, John Crowley, who is retired, but he wrote a letter to the board. It was on the board agreement. And it was understood at that point in time that $4 million of Zone 2 budget funds would be allocated to the project, to the sewer project. That was said. That was done. And the $4 million would come out of property that was sold, and a lawsuit that was settled. And that amounted to rounded $12 million. Now, the argument has been presented, well, a lot of that went to Zone 2. It may have gone to Zone 2, but when you think about the Satakoy yard and the people it serves, and some money went there, it serves all of the county. All the county benefits from that yard. It's a beautiful yard. But the county did Zone 2, with Zone 2 money. The property owners in Zone 2, that money, in my view, should be with Zone 2. Should have been with Zone 2, should have stayed with Zone 2. But I was willing to accept the $4 million issue. So far, out of that money, $12 million, the El Rio project has received 1.6. Supervisor said no more. No more about what? I don't understand that. When you look at the documents that were handed out, especially at the, I think it was the December 19th board meeting, it was dated December 12th because the item was continued. But if you look at this chart right here, just take a look at it, and you look and see where the money went. It was cleverly done. It almost looks like Supervisor Bennett scripted it, but it was really cleverly done. Every supervisor from Mr. Bennett on through the row here would get some of that money in that supervisor's district, or that supervisor's zone is more appropriate to say. So some people said, why did you vote for this? Well, I looked at this, and oh, I am? Well, I'm explaining, I'm trying to answer the questions as appropriately as I can.
It's supposed to be a comment on what you've been doing.
This is what I've been doing. This is what I've been doing. Let me just wound it up. But if you look at the next page, there was hope. That's why I voted in favor. There was hope that the supervisors would vote to give that project $1.1 million from surplus Zone 2 money for the El Rio project. And groundwater, watershed protection district's mission includes water conservation and quality of water. So this fit in there. This was allowed. This could be done. So I would hope that, my greatest hope is this. Mr. Bennett, the election of 2004 is over. I wish you would stop campaigning against me. It's over. It's all done. Prior to the election date itself, you were making great comments in my opponent's literature. John Flynn cannot get 3 votes. So it's an effort, at least my interpretation, and other people in my district interpretation, that you, Mr. Bennett, have not given up campaigning. I won that campaign easily. I would hope and pray, Mr. Bennett, that you will get over that and stop putting me in the position that you've put me in as looking ineffective. 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 Let me ask Mr. Bennett to get over that, if you will. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Moving on from left to right. Supervisor Bennett, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to ask the board to adjourn in memory of the people on this list. And I have two quick questions. I know we have a lot to do. I have two quick questions for County Council, if I could. My two quick questions for County Council is this. Is it legal for supervisor to say, I'll vote for your item, I'll vote yes on this item if you'll vote yes on my item? Is that legal, just yes or no, or don't want us to get into a long?
It is not legal.
And my second question is, so if we have a motion in front of us, is your advice to us that we should vote on that motion based on the merits of the motion?
Yes.
Thanks a lot. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Some further questions, Madam Chair.
I would like to continue with board comments.
Okay.
And Supervisor Foy already went bravely. Supervisor Long.
Thank you. I, too, have a list to present to adjourn in memory of Hazel A. Finley and Santa Paula, longtime very active residents, and certainly join in, and I'm sure all the board does, in memory of Joe Luna. Joe was just a wonderful, wonderful man to work with, always very delightful, very positive, very professional, just a gentle soul, good man. And I know the entire department will miss him and mourn his loss, and his family, I'm sure. And I don't know if Supervisor Bennett had Gilbert Lowry on your list. What? Oh, I'm sorry. Lowry Gilbert. And actually, I've done that with him in the past. Yeah, it made the picture.
Mr. Gilbert, who also recently retired as the deputy in the ISD department, worked many projects, actually held over for a while to help us out with his retirement.
Yeah.
He went in for some surgery and
he did, yes. Yeah.
And he an untimely departure.
Yeah. Well, I won't make comment unless you wish to. You might want to bring it back next week or something. I didn't bring the clipping with me, but yes, Lowry Gilbert, and I say that affectionately because we had a little banter going over the many times I said that wrong. But as all of you know, just a genuinely nice man. Also somebody who was very much a dedicated county employee, cared so much about the department and did an excellent job for the department, and he too will be missed by his family and the county family. Yeah. Actually, that's a budget issue. Just a quick note. This Saturday, in case you don't have your reservation, who can answer the question? This is another Women's History Month. What Civil War nurse founded the American Red Cross? Clara Barton, the angel of the battlefield. That's right. In 1882. And our Red Cross in this county does just an excellent job working with all of our emergency response partners and teams, and they are having a fundraiser this Saturday. If you would like information on it, it is the Clara Barton Annual Awards Dinner. Women in our county are being recognized for their outstanding contribution to our county, and it will be a fun event being held at the commemorative Air Force hangar in Camarillo, and it will be certainly a great fun event to be to and to recognize outstanding women in our county. So just to give you that. Now, in light certainly of County Council's cautious comment to us about commenting on items that are not on our agenda and getting too much into a discussion on those items, in response to the mailing that was sent out to Zone 2, which I also represent a significant portion of, including the cities of Santa Paula and Fillmore and the small unincorporated community of Piru, all three of which are facing significant challenges in meeting the water quality conditions that impact the Santa Clara River. And so they all three have significant wastewater treatment facilities that they are encumbered with building and to meet those water quality standards, and significant cost of those facilities and the significant increase to their sewer rates. So they too have a vested interest in the concerns that have been, a vested interest in looking for ways to help their community to address those costs. When I learned of the mailing that was sent into Zone 2, it raised great concern for me because the mailing did not in any way explain any of the history, both the chronology and the funding sources, and led, in fact, to, in my thinking, to a misrepresentation to that community as to the Watershed Protection District Board of Directors, of which we serve, decisions based on the use of Zone 2 funds. Unfortunately, I think that has caused some concern, and I certainly have heard from the leadership. So in response to that, I put together from the public record what I feel to be the correct information and chronology of activities that took place by the Board of Directors of the Watershed Protection District, and am working to get that out to the residents in Zone 2 in the district that I represent. But one of the things I would like to ask at this point, and I have a memo to ask Supervisor Flynn, a public records request that is related to that mailing. And I'm asking that formally at the dais because I want to have all of the information related to that mailing as to the total cost of the mailing, the budget unit that was charged for the mailing, the APNs that were noted on the mailing before it went to the county mailing house. So that means there was either a mailing house used to pick that universe of over 11,000 pieces of mail. And my interest is in those 11,000 pieces of mail I would like to have the information so I can understand how many pieces of mail went into the communities that I represent versus Oxnard or Del Rio. And I would also like to have the name of whatever mailing house or service that was used. I think the taxpayers have a right to know how much money was expended on this mailing that basically invited people to a press conference. And I think that even if the budget unit charged was Supervisor Flynn's office, I think that the Watershed Protection District Board of Directors have a right to know that information, and it should be available publicly. So I have a memo that I will provide to Supervisor Flynn with that formal request. And that concludes my board comments.
So you're requesting to get this information back? Yes, I am. Okay, so maybe what we can do, instead of belabor it this morning, when we get the information back, we can have this discussion. And probably would be agendized at that point.
Well, let me just say, Madam Chair, that I will be very happy to provide the information. I think it's very important. I will also provide information as to where the bulk of the money comes from Zone 2. It comes from Oxnard.
Okay. I would request that we continue this when we have it on the agenda.
But I will provide it.
Thank you. We will get the information.
You're all invited to my office to look at my records, everyone.
And I know we can get frustrated with votes of the Board of Supervisors sometimes, and I can understand your frustration. I wasn't happy when $3 million, oh well, I'm not going to go into it. You've heard it before. Yes, thank you. I didn't even have to make it and you understand it. I would like to, I have a few things I'd like to bring to the attention of the board. Supervisor Flynn and I both attended a meeting with the chair of the California Air Resource Board yesterday in Santa Barbara, and we're able to make our position heard in regards to our air pollution control district regarding shipping emissions, diesel emissions, as well as portable farm equipment, and then also AB 32, which is a new law that's going to require greenhouse gas emissions to be reduced to, I think it's 1990 levels. So those are all important things coming along our county way, and I'm glad that we were able to get some of our viewpoints out there. I also got to be principal for half a day at Sequoia Middle School out in Newbury Park over the last week, and then also I'm working on formation of a Ventura Park Fire Safe Council, and we are taking our lead from the Ojai Fire Safe Council, and I think those are wonderful ways to get citizens involved in protecting their own homes, and that's something we really have to do, particularly in areas next to a lot of wild land. Additionally, I wanted to give a hearty thank you to particularly two organizations. I held kind of a spontaneous food drive out in the Conejo Valley area in my district, and Brookside Elementary School in Oak Park collected 839 pounds of food that was donated to Food Share, as well as Whole Foods, the grocery store in my district, not only contributed to this like 2-week food drive that I did, but also has decided to continue contributing every week to Food Share, and that goes to help the hungry in our county. So that was really nice to see, and you realize sometimes all you have to do is ask. So that was great. I also wanted to mention that this also is the Agriculture Day in terms of March 21st. It is the first day of spring. It's also National Agriculture Day, and it's the week of March 18th through 26th, and just commenting that agriculture provides almost everything we eat, use, and wear on a daily basis, but too few people truly understand this contribution, so it gives our schools and others an opportunity to do that. And of course, March 21st is also the first day of spring, our vernal equinox, when the sun crosses over at precisely 8:07 p.m. The sun will cross directly over the Earth's equator, and that's always something to remember, too. I also wanted to mention some people who have passed in my district, but before I do that, I wanted to recognize one of our county employees who achieved quite a feat, and that is Roberta Rodriguez. Our clerk has gone through a certification program and is now a certified clerk of the board from the California Clerk of the Board Society. So I wanted to honor you for that. So. And so I would also ask that the board close and honor the people on this list. I, too, was rather shocked to find out about Joe Luna. I didn't know that he was ill. It's really unfortunate. He was a wonderful guy, and I know that he is very missed already. I also wanted to point out that a gentleman by the name of Michael Dahan also has passed away. He is a owner of a couple of dive schools, and had a diving accident, ice diving. He was a student at Briggs School and Santa Paula High School, a resident of Thousand Oaks. He leaves behind his wife, Linda, daughters Lauren and Lindsay, aged 3.5 and 5 weeks. He will be very missed, and wanted to close also in his honor. And with that, I think that concludes board comments, and I would like to move on then to our regular agenda. Item 29 would be our first agenda item then, and that would be Dale Tompkins.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. Mr. Johnston, Del Tompkins with the County Executive Office. This agenda item presents for the board's consideration a number of recommendations for reappointments and appointments to the Assessment Appeals Board. The majority of the recommendations concern reappointments for current regular and alternate members of the Appeals Board, as well as their hearing officer and alternate hearing officer. The recommendations are intended to bring all of their terms current. The final recommendation contains the names of individuals nominated by members of your board to fill 3 vacancies for alternate members on the appeals board. Those recommendations came forward as a result of a request to all of your board members for possible nominees. We actually ended up with 4 applicants. Those were reviewed by county council because the Revenue and Taxation Code is very specific about the minimum qualifications required for membership on the Assessment Appeals Board, and it was determined that one of the 4 candidates did not meet the minimum qualifications. So the 3 individuals put forward before you today do meet the qualifications. The attachment to the board letter shows a listing of all of your current members, the alternates, as well as the hearing officer, the alternate hearing officer, and then the 3 individuals who are now recommended to fill those vacant alternate positions. And we did randomly stagger the terms for those 3 new alternate members.
Thank you. We do have a recommendation then from staff for approval. Yes, Supervisor Flynn?
The recommended ones are at the bottom of the page.
Correct.
Vince J. Curtis, Lee A. Hess, and Joseph A. Fernig?
Correct.
Those are the 3.
Those are the 3 new alternate members.
Okay, here's one thing one has to be concerned about, and I don't even know these people, so I don't have any concern about them. I served on the assessment board for 20 years. The important thing about the Assessment Appeals Board is that politics cannot enter it at all, cannot enter your decision, and that's one of the most important things. If you have for example, when I served on the board, there were people who came from Oxnard appealing their assessment. Well, I had to push any political or I know you or anything like that out of the way and only make the decision based on the merits of their argument and the merits of the assessor's argument. It's like a quasi-judicial decision. I was chair for that long. Those are the main things, and of course the others are knowledge of the law, which is important in order to make your decision. But I have nothing against the 3 people. I don't simply know them, but the assessor did raise some comments, I think. That's all my comments.
Thank you. Supervisor Long?
Yeah, well, I have a question in response to looking at this that I just received regarding the assessor's questions, understanding protocol. It is the board's role and authority to make these appointments, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. And then I did pass out applications to people in my district, too, that were qualified. Vince Curtis is a longtime appraiser, and Lee Hess is a longtime attorney, and I think they're both very fair-minded.
Move the recommended action.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Seeing no objections, then that passes. Item 30 is also an item from our county executive office, and this comes back to us from
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Been a whirlwind last couple of weeks. Good morning. My name is Christy Madden from the County Executive Office. 2 weeks ago, your board directed staff to try and work with the applicant for the WAVE project in the city of Ventura and see if we could come to some agreement that would satisfy the condition that putting our home funds into a project in the city of Ventura would provide services to people from our entitlement area. I'm here to report that staff continues to work with the applicant on this process. We are working towards a memorandum of agreement that we intend to be signed by the county, the city of Ventura, the Ventura Housing Authority, and Project Understanding, and place on behalf of their organization and their property management company. We have since learned that 15 units of the 69 low-income units out of that project will be supported with Section 8 vouchers from the Housing Authority. Those vouchers will be targeted to persons who are homeless or formerly homeless who have supportive housing needs. Supportive housing needs could be people who are emancipating from the foster care system. They could be people who need mental health services, drug and alcohol treatment, any variety of supports needed for living within the project. Project Understanding is expected to have offices on site. They will be screening applicants and referring them to the property management company to enter into the rental agreements. Due to a conflict with the general use requirements for the application of tax credits, and you may recall that that was a time-sensitive issue for WAVE. They are submitting a tax credit application for this project. I want to make clear that a statement I make in the board letter that we are going to be reserving 5 units for the unincorporated area, we have to change that language to provide preference to the unincorporated area because it creates a conflict legally. But I think that that will not be necessarily problematic in the project, and we can work with Project Understanding as our advocate to provide those units for our residents from the entitlement area. I did have a brief conversation with Chris Velasco yesterday, and I should let you know that they do intend to come back during the focused RFP process and apply for additional funding to get up to their original $850,000 request, just so you know that. So that concludes my comments. What staff is saying is that we need to reach signatures on this memorandum of agreement by the end of the month. And if not, then staff is recommending that we release the funds into the focused RFP process. The timing here is that my staff is working feverishly in finalizing our annual plan that has to be out on the street next week for public review, and we have to address the disposition of these funds. We need to know whether it's going to be recommended for this project or go out in the project solicitation. Concludes my comments. Questions?
Comments or questions?
A few comments. One, I realize this is a very short time frame for you to work under, and I just want to compliment Christy Madden. She's, as always, she's worked really professionally on this thing, so that's one. The second comment I'd like to make is that, of course, anybody can apply when we go out into the next round. Mm-hmm. I just want to make it clear to the board that should we approve this, I would not at all make the argument that we've done this and now we need to do the second half with the next round of funding. That should be an independent decision that's made. We make a decision on this, and then that next one, it depends on what are the other options and stuff. So wanted to be clear about that. I really appreciate the board support last time in trying to think creatively about this, because I think that everyone would say this is really a good project. It's it's a different kind of project. Having Project Understanding involved in terms of the screening, I think it makes it even a stronger project in terms of just how creative it is. I do know that, at least I've been told, that we have at other times we've used this same kind of thing, preference instead of reserve, to get around this federal requirement. That we've been able to do that in the past with some other projects. My one question that I just wanted to ask, if I could, of you, Christy, is that the motion that we made was between $350,000 and $400,000 when we made the motion 2 weeks ago. And the reason I left it that way is I knew that we were talking about 5 units and that it wasn't quite clear what the cost was per unit. My understanding is the cost is $77,273 per unit, which would be $386,365. Could you just comment on that versus the $350 here? Did you guys, in the rush, did you have time to pin down the exact amount, or can you tell me where?
Well, I think the logic there is the original application that was submitted was for $850,000 for 11 units. Mm-hmm. So I guess if you do the math and break it down, funding 5 units, we could give them a proportional allocation of funding.
Which would be the 386?
Correct.
That would be the accurate amount?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
Correct.
And your recommendation here is that we go forward with the proviso that if they don't get everything done and all the signatures that you need by March 30th, it's just over, and the funds get released. And I certainly think that's fair also. It gives them enough time to get the legal, and that's not very much time to get all the legal stuff done. Puts them under that deadline, but that they have, at least in concept, been able to find a way to get to the point where the draft has, they've got a draft out there that they think conceptually, if everybody's agreeable to this draft, this would make this work. So with that being the case, I appreciate it. I would move the recommended action. I think that if we want to be consistent with our direction last time, which was 5 units, and we said between 350 and 400, I would go with 5 units at 386, only because it'll give us more clarity. If we're at the 350 and we're at 4.5 units, that makes it sort of odd in terms of figuring out what we have preference for. So anyway, that would be my recommended action.
I have a motion and a second.
Let me just comment
Supervisor
on the
Flynn?
motion. I just asked Mr. Bennett not to drop the campaign of 2004. So here we have an issue before us, and to either vote yes or no, and it could be interpreted, well, Flynn voted no because of Mr. Bennett. So that's not going to be the case. I'm going to vote yes, but I do want to say this. We're stepping out of our territory here. We have a responsibility to the cities, the small cities of Port Hueneme and so forth, Ojai, etc., and then the unincorporated area. So I hope this doesn't really set a precedent here, because are we going to open this up now next time to all the cities, for example? That becomes a concern. We always say, oh, I wish we had enough money to fund all these programs, and we don't. But here we are stepping into the city of Ventura, which cities have such an easy way to, or at least easier way than we, to raise money. And it seems to me that should be the responsibility. But I wanted to raise my concerns, but I'll still vote in favor of it, for the reason given.
Thank you. And it does seem that if you're going to be housing emancipated foster youth, it's good to have them in a city, in this particular instance, in a city where you have all those kind of services. Appreciate your extra work on this. It'd be nice to be able to provide this project for people in our area to be in. So we have a motion, second. See no objections, no comments. That motion then passes unanimously.
And again, I want to thank staff and appreciate the board's approach to this unusual request and stuff.
And we're right on 9:30 to the second. Isn't that great, the way that works out? So we'll go to our 9:30 time certain items, and our first one is a presentation of a resolution honoring Elizabeth Cameron.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth is coming down, and this is a happy time because we're able to announce Elizabeth's ability to win an award. She won the John Loeb Memorial Award, and it is for the outstanding performance state of California as code enforcement, in the area of code enforcement. We certainly have had code enforcement show up on our radar screen quite a bit more here in the last few months, and so CEO staff has contacted me, let me know about your winning this award, and they're interested in making sure you got publicly recognized for it. So that's a compliment also to have the CEO's office contact us and do that. I want to thank the CEO's office and Marty Robinson in particular for requesting this. So I'd like to read this resolution, and this is a resolution honoring Elizabeth Cameron, county employee extraordinaire. Whereas Elizabeth Cameron began her public service career as a police, fire, and ambulance dispatcher. Adding to those duties, she also became the training officer. Elizabeth has worked for the County of Ventura for 18 years. She began as a code enforcement technician assigned to the Abandoned Vehicle Program and advancing through the ranks as a code enforcement officer. Now imagine you start as a vehicle inspection person and 18 years later you get in the State of California award as the Outstanding Code Enforcement Officer. That's a nice career advancement. After establishing a sterling reputation for stalwart professionalism and commitment to excellence, she was promoted to Senior Code Enforcement Officer and Supervisor. She She's tirelessly promoted the goals of her profession in order to ensure the health and safety of the people by enforcing and promoting the Uniform Building Codes, Uniform Housing Code, and Abatement and Dangerous Building Code. For people in the code world, that really means something, all right, for the rest of us. Elizabeth unselfishly shares her knowledge with others when she's an instructor with Ventura College, teaching international zoning code, international housing codes, legal concepts, and international residential code. Another certainly impressive. You can see why we said county employee extraordinaire. Elizabeth has been elected by her peers of other jurisdictions to represent them in government associations. She served as past president of the Interagency Code Enforcement Association, past board director member of the Southern California Association of Code Enforcement Officers, and board of director member of the California Association of Code Enforcement Officers. And Elizabeth was honored by the California Association of Code Enforcement Officers for recognition of her outstanding performance, dedication, and many contributions to the profession of code enforcement by presenting her with the John Lowe Memorial Award for 2006 in Monterey, California. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Ventura County Board of Supervisors does hereby honor and recognize Elizabeth A. Cameron for all of her many accomplishments and for her extraordinary career in the field of health and safety. And Elizabeth, I'm going to come down and give this to you, and we would love to have a few words of sage advice for us from county employee.
As we say in the field, it's not a job, it's an adventure. So you never know what you're going to see day to day. So thank you very much for.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
when I first saw this, I thought, oh, no, you're retiring.
I did
You can't retire.
Wish.
You can't. No. And certainly, wonderful congratulations and kudos to you to be recognized by your peers and statewide. I mean, and the incredible job you've always done in our county. You are known to be very tough, but very fair, and very courageous. And code enforcement, it's a very tough job to be able to go onto property in many cases that any normal human being wouldn't dare to venture beyond the gate. And working with you over the years, you have always been so very professional, and very much understood the laws and regulations that you represent when you go out in the field, and I have always appreciated that, and you're so well deserving of this, and I'm sure you're very proud to be recognized by your peers.
Thank you.
I know Supervisor Flynn wants to comment.
Yes, I really appreciate the work that you do. I remember Tapatio.
Oh, yes.
That was a tough one, and believe me, Liz worked beyond any normal working hours. She was out there at night and so forth. It's just an example of the service that she's given Ventura County and the residents in Ventura County. It's really when you do the kind of work you're doing, you protect the health of people, the safety of people. But I'd like to ask you to introduce the guy over there with the camera.
Oh, that's my husband, Bill Schneider, and thanks to him for all his support for listening to my stories every night.
And if I can comment, your father-in-law is here too. He's
Bill Schneider
sitting in
Sr.
the back. But Bill was a student of mine, and he's always praised me for my great teaching ability. Right, Bill?
I just have to say, I too had that, oh my gosh, don't tell me we're going to lose another one, because we lost Jack Phillips, and they moved on and retired, and Todd Collard, and oh, please, not Liz too. So I was really glad to see that this isn't your retirement, but actually an award, and a very well-deserved award. And, the Board of Supervisors has been doing what they can, and hopefully will do more in terms of getting you more resources to help you enforce those codes. Thank you so much for your hard work.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Could we have a picture here, and then we'll do our applause at home. Let's see. All right.
For my mother.
Okay, come on. Whoever wants to take pictures, come on down.
Yeah, now's the time.
Oh, here we go.
Congratulations. Appreciate it.
Oh, Carrollton.
I hope I'm remembering something that actually happened, Liz, because I'm getting to that stage where my wife tells me sometimes I have a fanciful imagination. But when I came back to the county back in 1998, didn't you and I work together briefly on a park inspection? I was hired to come back and try to pull back together the different parks in the county that had gone under leases and had fallen into disrepair. And there was one up in Supervisor Bennett's area of Oakview, where for years there had been a kind of a community group that looked after the park, and then they couldn't afford to continue, and so they turned it over to the county. But they had a kind of a night watchman person who looked after things and kept up the ball fields, and he lived on the property in a trailer. That was like 20 years earlier. As the years progressed, apparently there was less and less taking care of the ball field. There was no night watchman. In fact, the person didn't even come to the property on a regular basis. And there sits this double-wide trailer in the middle of a publicly owned property, fallen into disrepair, violating most of the safety regulations, and basically free rent and not doing anything. So when I started out trying to solve that problem, this lady came to see me because it was because of the public safety issues. And the thing I always remember about you, Liz, is that you didn't come in and say it's not in my department, or we need to go talk to the state, or what I got on almost every other facility. We sort of sat down, made up a list. You went out and inspected it, told me what we could and couldn't do. And by the time we were done, the person packed up, left. The trailer was removed from the public property. There were no lawsuits or anything. And I always felt like if we had to use the hammer, we were there. But we never had to do it because she did such a good job of giving me what I needed to persuade the individual to move on. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It is a tough job. And thus she got her nickname, Liz the Hammer Cameron. It is a hard job. We do have a comment card from Carol Dean Williams on this item.
Carol Dean Williams, 61-year resident. It's nice to be here at this meeting and see these kind of employees. I consider this my second home, so I interact with a lot of the employees, and it's really good to see those honored, and I believe it should be happening a little bit more often. Thank you.
Thank you. You're home away from home. Our next item has been patiently awaited by, I believe, our brownie, Griffin 70. If you'd like to come up, we have a resolution proclaiming Girl Scouts Make the World a Better Place Week, and it's not just because of those great cookies that they bring. I'm going to come down there and present this to you. Well, we've already enjoyed the Thin Mints at my house this year. This is a resolution of the Board of Supervisors of Ventura County proclaiming Girl Scouts Make the World
Better place where?
Week. It says, whereas Monday, March 12, 2007 marks the 95th anniversary of the founding of Girl Scouts of the United States of America by Juliet Gordon Lowe in 1912 in Savannah, Georgia. And whereas throughout its distinguished history, Girl Scouts has helped millions of girls and women develop courage, confidence, and character. And whereas through the dedication of time and talent of volunteers of different backgrounds, abilities, and areas of expertise, the Girl Scouts organization thrives for girls in so many settings. And whereas through Girl Scouting's unique leadership development program, girls define leadership by making the world a better place by discovering, connecting, and taking action in their communities. And whereas Girl Scouting takes an active role in increasing girls' awareness of opportunities available to them today in math, science, sports, technology, health, and fields that can expand their horizons, and whereas more than 3.7 million Girl Scout members nationwide will be celebrating 95 years of this American tradition, with nearly 50 million women who grew up participating in Girl Scouting and exemplify the impact of this amazing movement. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Ventura County Board of Supervisors takes great pleasure in applauding the commitment of Girl Scouts that they have made to America's girls, and proudly proclaims the week of March 11th through 17th, 2007 as Girl Scouts Make the World a Better Place Week. Thank you, Griffin, for your work with Girl Scouts. You want to get one picture and we can hold that. Thank you. And while I'm up here, I'd also like to do the next item, and this is a resolution honoring William Rowland. Come on up, William. This is for his contributions to our community. And it reads, whereas William Rowland, a founding resident of Westlake Village in Ventura County, has earned the gratitude and respect of residents in our community for his generous efforts in support of people in need, especially through his 1988 creation of the William Rowland Firefighters Foundation. And whereas serving as the president of the foundation, William Rowland has helped direct his philanthropic activities to benefit the families of firefighters injured or killed, to help the firefighters' family members who face life-threatening and medical challenges, and to provide reward money for solving arson crimes that threaten our community. And whereas a native of Southern California, William Rowland served for 17 years as a Los Angeles City firefighter, followed by his career in Ventura County spanning over 4 decades as a builder who helped create the character of the Conejo Valley as a most desirable place to live. And whereas William Rowland's life has been characterized as an American rags to riches story, and he is to be commended for turning his good fortune to humanitarian causes that further enrich the community. And whereas William Rowland was honored as the recipient of the Los Angeles City Fire Department's Medal of Valor for the heroism he displayed as a firefighter during a 1969 emergency in one of the worst winter storms in Southern California history. And he was further commended by the White House, the United States Senate, the state of California, and the city of Los Angeles, while his philanthropic work received grateful recognition in the form of a beautiful plaque from the Los Angeles Firemen's Relief Association to acknowledge his significant contributions to the Widows, Orphans, and Disabled Firemen's Fund. And whereas William Rowland has enriched our world through family members Mary Kay, Debbie, and Cindy, now, therefore, be it resolved that the Ventura County Board of Supervisors takes great pleasure in thanking William Rowland for his work to benefit our community, and hereby does wish him and his family well in future endeavors. So I'll present this to you and congratulate you.
Thank you.
Here you go. Did you want to say a few words?
Here, come over here.
I want to get the photo first. All right.
Here we go.
All right.
One more. That's an in charge, right?
Thank you very much for the few minutes that you're giving me here this morning. Linda, who has given so much to our community, was a little girl one time, and at that time it was Linda Moss, and she grew up with my children, and that would be Debbie and Cindy. Just a few years ago.
Supervisor Parker told us she was only 39.
Well, in wrapping this up, it is an honor to receive this recognition in behalf of my foundation, and I'd like this privilege of reading to you an old fireman's prayer. When I am called to duty, God, whenever flames may raise, save me the strength to save life, wherever be its age. Help me isn't that funny? Eyes also go with age. Help me embrace a little child before it's too late, or save an older person from that horror of that fate. Enable me to be alert and hear the weakest shout, and quickly and efficiently put the fire out. I want to fill my calling and give the best of me, to save every neighbor and to protect his property. And if, according to your will, I have to lose my life, please bless with your protective hands my children and my wife. Thank you for this honor. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much for what you do in our community. Thank you.
Oh, my goodness. Our next item is a 9:30 time certain item number 20, and this is John Flynn doing Peace Corps' 46th anniversary.
Yeah, thank you very much. If I could call up Cecilia Franco, and Vincent Vlasic.
Good morning.
Fine, thank you.
It's my honor, board members, to present this resolution to recognize the Peace Corps on the occasion of its 46th anniversary. And we all remember, well, I don't know about Linda, were you born before or after 61? Whereas the Peace Corps was established by executive order on March the 1st, 1961 by President John F. Kennedy, who appointed his brother, Sergeant Shriver, as its first director. Is that incorrect? Whereas the Peace Corps was authorized by the Peace Corps Act of September 22nd, 1961, which commissioned the Peace Corps to promote world peace and friendship through Peace Corps activity, which shall be made available to interested countries and areas, men and women of the United States qualified for service and were willing to serve. The Peace Corps now is active in 70 countries. Its volunteers helping improve education and health systems, and working to protect the environment and to improve agricultural production and water conservation while striving to eradicate HIV, AIDS, and working with young people to give them the tools with which to succeed to become leaders. And whereas Ventura County is the home to a number of Peace Corps veterans, such as the people we have here before us, Vincent Vlasic of Thousand Oaks, who lived and worked in the Dominican Republic for 2 years in the 1960s, and is the home of Enrique Franco of Oxnard, currently a Peace Corps volunteer in the Dominican Republic, where he's working with young people and the homeless, and where he represents the most noble ideas of the United States of America. So we take a great pleasure in presenting this to both of you today in recognition of the 46th anniversary. Thank you. Congratulations. I hope you both say something.
I have something to say. Thank you very much, Supervisor Flynn. My name is Vince Vlasic, and I'm a longtime resident here of this county, and I would like to just share a few thoughts on how we became friends and how this whole process started. Both my wife, whose name is Polly Vlasic, we're both former volunteers. I served in the Dominican Republic from 66 to 68, and my wife was a community health nurse in Thailand from 67 to 69. And we became acquainted as Peace Corps recruiters. And so we have a long commitment to the Peace Corps, to say the least. But in February of this year, the Dominican Republic Peace Corps celebrated its 45th consecutive year of service to that country. and both my wife and I traveled there to participate in this historic event. It was truly historic in many respects because the Peace Corps survived through very difficult times. The 60s, as we all know, were turbulent years in many ways and happy years in other ways, depending on which ladder you were sitting in. The country had faced a civil war in 1963 after assassination of a dictator of 31 years in 1960. We also had the Cuban crisis in 1962 or 63 timeframe. And so the atmosphere was definitely turbulent. It was difficult, and yet people responded to the words of John F. Kennedy when he asked, he says, don't ask what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. This was March of 1961. I have to give credit to Senator Hubert Humphrey from the state of Minnesota. He actually initiated the Peace Corps in 1960, but the process was closed and never voted on. But it was President Kennedy who, through executive order, initiated the Peace Corps in March of 1961. Therefore, it was the 46th anniversary. The Peace Corps in the Dominican Republic has had over 4,500 volunteers serving there continuously at some point, working in the areas that were just indicated in this resolution. The country itself stated to us through their leadership that their development over the last 46 years would not have been as successful as it has been had it not been for the volunteers who served there. The Peace Corps is an apolitical organization, and during the Civil War in 1963, the Peace Corps volunteers were the only ones, with the exception of the papal nuncio, who were allowed access to territories that were considered hostile. To this day, the Peace Corps has been very successful, and I have to say that during this 45th anniversary, I had the pleasure of meeting its first director, Andy Hernandez, who is 94 years old. During this celebration, I also met new volunteers. The most recent, of course, was Enrique Franco, who happens to be the son of this lovely lady here, who's a resident of the city of Oxnard. And how we met is that we were asked to sponsor volunteers because they were not able to afford the fancy dinner at the hotel where we were staying at. So when I met this young gentleman, I asked him, I says, Enrique, where are you from? He says, I'm from a little city in California called Oxnard. You probably never heard of it. And I says, my son. I live in Thousand Oaks. And so that's how we became acquainted. When my wife and I returned to California, I told them that we were going to contact them, and we did the following week. And they were delighted to hear that their son is doing well. He's been there about 7 months now, and he's doing great work with the homeless. So the call to service has been heard by the next generation, and we hope that the next generation will continue to follow the footsteps of those who had served in previous years. The Peace Corps has 3 basic missions. Number 1, it was to provide technical assistance and other forms of training to the third world countries. It was supposed to also provide a better understanding of Americans with the host country people. And the 3rd mission, which is most critical and hasn't been successful to its fullest extent, is bringing the Peace Corps experience back home to the United States and sharing those cultural differences and similarities with fellow Americans. And as the world has become smaller, as we all know, especially with the advent of internet, we're all interconnected. And as a result, we have a greater responsibility to become better acquainted with one another. In the 46 years, 187,000 people served as volunteers in over 139 countries. Today, we have roughly 7,000 serving. The highest point was in the 1960s when I served. We had 15,000 volunteers. And we've never been able to reach the 10,000 goal over the last 10 years. 93% are college grads, 12% have graduate degrees, and currently we're working in 73 countries. Some of the notable return volunteers: Senator Christopher Dodd, who served with me in the Dominican Republic during the same period of time, 1966-68, currently a presidential candidate. Sí. Representative Sam Farr, Democratic California, who served in Colombia from 1964 to 66. Samuel Gillespie III, who was Senior Vice President of ExxonMobil Corporation, served in Kenya in 66, 68. Chris Matthews, who some of you might see on TV occasionally, served in Swaziland from 66 to 68. Excuse me, 68 to 70. And Donald Petrimas, who's Vice President of Warner Brothers, served in Brazil from 76 to 78. And ultimately, Representative Chris Shays, a Republican from Connecticut, who was in Fiji from 68 to 70. Another notable volunteer was Lillian Carter, the mother of former President Jimmy Carter. She was a nurse and served in her 70s. So you all have a chance to serve at some point. The first director, just to correct the record, was not Robert Kennedy. He was the Attorney General. The first director of the Peace Corps was Sergeant Shriver, who is the father of Maria Shriver, the wife of our current governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger. As I said earlier, we're all part of a small world. It's a global community. And being associated with the Peace Corps is to be a part of a true American legacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you for your service.
Madam Chair, if I could, just hearing those comments about the 1960s, and the launch just reminds me of the idealism that swept the country during that time. And I think you're right. I think that we have the potential for this new generation. I really sense it with the young people that I've been working with.
That was one of the remarkable things that I noticed when I had the opportunity to talk to the current volunteers, and many of them who were just finishing out their 2-year service, is that they were well represented. I mean, they did such a fantastic job of recruiting people from all walks of life. Every conceivable cultural and racial group was represented. And they were just as motivated as I was 41 years ago for myself.
And we need that second wave to sort of sweep through and stuff. So thank you for keeping the fire alive during
Mrs.
those 4
Franco
years.
would like to say a couple of words.
Solo quiero decir unas palabras en español porque no puedo hablar bien el inglés. Me siento muy feliz al recibir este reconocimiento de mi hijo. Es un gran orgullo para mí y estoy muy feliz. Muchas gracias a todos ustedes.
For those of you who did not understand, Mrs. Franco is very appreciative of receiving this award on behalf of her son. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I also wanted to mention that Vince Vlasik's wife was a nurse with our healthcare agency and won our Nurse of the Year award. So, Polly Vlasik. We'll move on to our next item then. This is our item 21, which is a discussion on our report of investments. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's been about a year since I've been here, but I'm happy to be back. I know some of you asked if I could attend the meeting occasionally, and I'm here, and I'm happy to report 508 is the yield. So I'm definitely here at the high end of the range, and 5% looks so good. I just wish it would last for a while. I don't feel that it's going to last that long, because if you look at the intermediate long-term bond rates, they indicate that the next moves the Fed will make will probably be down. So intermediate and long-term bond rates are what the market thinks short-term rates will be in the future. So I'm not sure how many 5% we're going to have, but we're happy to get this one. I would like to talk on one brief thing. I read an article in the Ventura County Star about a utility company. I wasn't in on the interview or any part of it, but someone called me from upstairs, and we were talking about it, and I thought it was so funny when they referred to our yield as horrible. And that's fine with me. I've been through enough in this world to have some pretty good institutional history Unfortunately, Camarillo had $25 million. They went down to $500,000 through some very good ideas that were presented to them in investments. We all know about Orange County, and one of my favorite pictures is when I was in Santa Barbara. The issue came up about Orange County and investing in mutual funds. And I told the treasurer at that time I felt that it was inappropriate and too much volatility and risk. But I had to live with Bob Citron's rates for about 2 years being higher. Then Hal Pittman hired me down here to run this portfolio and do investments only. But I kept this article here where you have the county treasurer standing in front of his vault, safe and sound. And this was right after Orange County. And then the city, everybody pointing fingers at each other and actually firing the treasurer for getting into mutual funds and getting into Orange County. So I'm not saying they won't make money doing this, but they're comparing apples to pineapples. They're comparing a dollar for dollar share fund where you put in $1 and you get interest to a mutual fund, which means if you buy here, it depends on where you sell. You'll lose money, you'll make money. And I know they say they don't need their money for 10 years or whatever, but there is a reasonable amount of risk, and I'm not criticizing what they're doing, but I don't think our portfolio is horrible when we can guarantee these kind of rates with the highest credit rating S&P will give you and the highest volatility rating they'll give you. But I do like the older I get, that's the one good thing about getting old, to sit back and listen to people take shots. But as you know, I've been doing this since 1994 for all of you, or most of you, some of you. And as Hal Pittman used to say, I can sleep nights with you doing it. I don't stay out of the range. I abide by the investment policy that you adopt annually. And we may not be hitting a ton of home runs like Babe Ruth did, but he also led the league in strikeouts. So I'm very happy. I also would like to say one thing. Supervisor Michaels worked with me on the TOC committee and on the retirement board. And when she left, I was wondering, who the new person's going to be, because I've gone through this. And I've subsequently had several conversations with Supervisor Foy. And I'm very impressed with his business and with his financial background. And if you know me, I'm not saying this. My biggest problem is I always tell the truth. But I'm looking very forward to working with you. And also, your idea of an East County presence is very interesting to me, because when I was at Santa Barbara, I funded a bond issue for Santa Maria Services, which is 45 to 47 miles from Santa Barbara. And we built a building, and we moved treasurer, tax, auditor, assessor. And I just spoke with the assistant assessor recorder, because it's one position there. And it's going better than ever. They have 8 people in the clerk recorder's office. They have 10 in the assessor, 3 or 4 in the treasurer tax, and 2 retirement people. So I don't know what you'll decide, but do you want any information, Supervisor, or any of you? I was in from doing the bond issue to digging the first shovel of dirt. And that's been there now about 15 years. So that's it. Any questions?
Madam
We do
Chair.
have some comments. I think we'll start from the right and go to the left. Supervisor
okay.
Ford, did you want- or Supervisor Long, everyone
Yes,
has
thank
a
you.
comment.
Thank you, and I appreciate that you're presenting this report today. You have worked with us, as you noted, since '94, and you always do such an excellent job in managing the portfolio, and we have full confidence and faith in the performance of it. And I think that following that Orange County fiasco, the board has this on a regular basis now on our agenda, so that we can make sure that the policies we set are being followed, and that we hear publicly, so the public can hear what is the strength of their investments and that we are managing them. And you do an excellent job, and I just wanted to offer that, and thank you so much for that. And congratulations on your reelection to the Retirement Board.
Thank you.
Supervisor Floyd?
I have a privilege of being fortunate here when I got on this board to sit next to some good knowledge, which was part of my request here. And on this retirement board, I get to sit next to Don with all this knowledge too, and he's been very helpful. I mean, Bob, teaching me what I need to know. Matter of fact, we spent some time yesterday morning going through a whole lot of stuff. I mean, there's a lot to this, and and I'm just hoping in the next 4 years I can get 1% of what he knows, and I feel like I know more than 90% of the people. But it's amazing what we learn. But it also is what I'm excited about is he does believe that how this money is managed is critical. It is at some point a needed amount of money we will need at some point, and he's not willing to take a risk, understanding that he wants to make a return, which is important. But it's interesting when you look at that, return to them is number 3 on their list. It's safety, liquidity, and then return. And so there's that balance that we all deal with, and I'm just impressed about what he knows and how he does what he does. And it's exciting. It's also exciting that he also understands some of my thoughts that I know it's important to Supervisor Parks and myself is trying to bring services to the East County, and being involved in that, his understanding of that and how it worked and what was important. Because also he understands too that the taxpayers do pay a big portion. The East County pays a large portion of taxes, and bringing services to that part of the county I know is part of my goal, and I know is part of your goal too. But it's also great to have a person who's done it, seen it happen, and seen it work. And you also have those relationships up there that we can also get additional information how it continues to work.
Anytime.
And I do appreciate that. But it's great to have such an expert on our side. And you don't always find those kind of experts. And so I'm just privileged to sit next to you and learn. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Supervisor Bennett and Supervisor
Yeah, as we move into a period of greater volatility and greater risk here, I think we'll be even more appreciative of the fact that the board has this very conservative policy and that we have a real pro like yourself there to implement it. So I just want to use this opportunity to remind us that more than ever we need to fight the temptation to sort of push the envelope and to make sure that we stay with safety as our first priority.
Supervisor Flynn?
Yes, as you know, I served on the retirement board for 20 years, and the fund is, I think when I went on was like $100 million. Let's look at it today. How much is it today?
2.5 to 3 billion.
And I'm happy that the words you said about Supervisor Floyd, because I think he brings that kind of experience that you have. But I've talked with you several times and really feel a comfort because you have so much knowledge. You have so much knowledge of risks. You have so much knowledge of investment. You're just a great person to have right there. And Al Pittman said he can sleep at night, and I agree with him. And I thank you for bringing, that knowledge and wisdom to Ventura County.
And I also appreciate our investment strategy. Safety has to be number one. And being on my little Triumphal Sanitation District and watching what they did, because all of a sudden they wanted return. They saw the market really low and they wanted better returns. And as a result, if they had kept the money with the county, that little district would have had hundreds of thousands of dollars more. But instead they took it out and started to play the bond market at a really bad time. And that's why when we know right now we're at kind of the top we're going to see, they're talking about potential recession, the idea that we are doing safety first really gives me comfort, because no matter what, we're going to be okay. And I really appreciate that. I also echoing Supervisor Foy's suggestion that we do get more services to the East County. The idea of a center there or an annex there of the county government centers is very appealing, obviously, and particularly for someone who's just been told her lease is up at my city hall where I've been having my office. It would be nice to have something that the supervisors in the East County could also stay at, so lease out.
When I talked to Jim McClure, the assistant assessor recorder, because as I said, it's one position, good friend of mine, I was on the oral board that hired him, and it was pretty easy. He was a Naval Academy grad, Stanford MBA, and not many times do you get that high quality of a person. Usually they're off for big salary and bonus, but I actually talked to him Sunday in his office. He was going through his Monday morning desk file, and he said the things like the title companies are so happy they don't have to come running down. There's, as I said, retiree reps up there, but I don't want to say any more other than if you just want an off-the-cuff view of how it's gone and how it's transpired. I know it's working well because they're expanding. Everybody's expanding. Treasure, tax, might be skeptical, but those people should be multi-purpose, and you can just do either one. One supervisor for a number of areas would be good enough on a general overview. You don't need a supervisor for every 2 people. Everybody goes and does their job. You need one person for accountability and vacation and all that. If you get an old bank, you've got your vault problem. We put a vault in. It's easy to do, but it's one of the more funny things to watch. It's very difficult to put a vault in. It takes a lot of work.
Well, thank you for your report, Supervisor.
Yeah, can I ask one more question, not on that issue, but you're talking about future interest. Looks like we're going to probably see lower interest.
The futures markets
are looking that way.
Yeah.
How much less do you expect coming to the budget next year? Do you have an idea, or maybe it's basically what kind of interest income are we going to be looking? Because I know we're looking at budget coming up, and probably Paul's already worked through some of those with you. I'm not sure, but are we going to be dealing with some of that?
I was going to let Paul make that decision. He's smarter than I am.
Okay.
Definitely, and a real credit. I've known Paul was on the retirement board. I took his place, and he's a tremendous asset to this county. I would say in the 4.25 range would be pretty good, because by the end of the year they'll probably drop it down 1/4 point or so, maybe more. And then again, when you do your budget, you're talking 15 months ahead. Right. If you're talking in March, you're talking to the end of the next, and that's how many Fed meetings and how many Bernanke comments and how many durable goods releases. But I'm very conservative on that estimate because I want to make sure we don't spend money we don't earn. So I want to tell you, if I think the range is 4 to 4.5, I'll pick 4 and then let everybody be happy if they get something extra.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. I mean, I know his budget's coming up, and I know that's, as Supervisor Flynn said, this money's getting larger, so we're getting a big portion of it along with the school district and everybody else. But I just wanted to have some understanding.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for everything.
Okay. Thank you.
Very much. And can I get a motion to
receive and file? So moved.
We have a motion and a second, and seeing no objections, then that passes. Our next item is we have a 9:30 second hearing on the MOA between the County of Ventura and the Specialized Peace Officers Association. I don't
move the recommended action.
I don't have any cards, and having a motion and a second, then that passes. Our next item would be going to our 10 a.m. Oral presentation, but I thought before we do that, we finish up our regular agenda items so our staff that are here can go back. What do we have left here on, I believe, item 31 is the district attorney presentation, and this is a authorization to submit an application for elder abuse vertical prosecution grant funds. And this is from the Office of Emergency Services.
Yes, thank you. My name is Mike Jump. I'm with the DA's office. I really don't have much to say. It's submitted for your authorization to submit an application. It is hope that the money we received last year will receive again this year. It's a reapplication grant, and there really isn't too much to say. I'm happy to answer any questions.
We have a recommendation. Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I certainly would put forth the motion and to just to appreciate the work of the District Attorney's Office. Elder abuse is something that unfortunately we continue to see too much of. So
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Seeing no objection, that passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is item 32, and this is Supervisor Foy on some reappointments, or a reappointment.
Yeah, we're recommending the reappointment here to, for Bob Burnham for the Parks Advisory Commission. He served on the commission since '95, and we think he will, his faithful service in the years, will be an asset to Ventura County. And then also Mr. Daniel Parnick, and he has 15 years of local government management experience, which we feel will be helpful to our cemetery district. So that'll be what we're looking for there, since we've got some issues out there. And also an appointment of Mr. Rich to the cemetery district 2. He's also done a great job since 2005. So that's our recommendation.
I'll second it. And are these people dying to get these appointments?
Got a motion and a second.
Yeah, they may be. We're dealing with this stuff.
Seeing no objection, that passes. We'll move on to item 33. This is our Public Works Agency. It's approval authorization for a lease agreement with Mountain Gate Associates. And I believe we had this before us before. We have a little bit more information. Good morning, Mr. Williams.
Good morning, Chair Parks, members of the board, Mr. Johnston. As you know, this item was continued from last week in order to give the healthcare agency the opportunity to provide some additional information, fiscal impact information that was requested. It's my understanding that those questions have been answered, and so we are now moving forward to recommend the approval of the lease. Representatives from the healthcare agency are also here today if there are additional questions.
Yes, Mr. Poe?
I know that I'm going to meet with the healthcare to get a lot of these questions answered in a more detailed more detailed. But a couple things, what I did, just so I can ask them publicly, one of the questions was, I think Supervisor Flynn asked, did we have the ability to terminate that lease? Is that negotiated within the lease?
No, that is not part of the lease. As I indicated, I talked to Supervisor Flynn, and I didn't realize that was a question you also were concerned about. The way this deal is structured, we have over $3.5 million of tenant improvements that are being amortized throughout the length of the lease term, and so it would not be prudent to if we were to negotiate in the lease an opportunity to get out early for whatever reason, we would have an enormous penalty to pay in order in terms of the amortization of the tenant improvements, and that was not part of the negotiation. As all of the other leases that we've done recently that have these longer terms, because we have these incredible amounts of tenant improvements that are bringing the buildings, which are basically office buildings in many instances, into state-of-the-art medical facilities. That's an expensive proposition. So the cost of the developers that are providing these tenant improvements are not interested in. Well, what I mean to say is, in order to keep this lease at a fair market level, we need to have this length of time to amortize the tenant improvements.
No, and I understand that. I guess I was just looking at it. If we got into a situation that we were losing an awful lot of money in different areas, we had to close something, sometimes it's cheaper to pay them $1.5 million in a one-time lump sum to get out than it is to pay $750,000 loss or $500,000 loss for the next 7 years. So those are some of the reasons why I was asking.
Understandable, but my position on that would be that at that point, if it came to that position, we would then certainly be in a position to try to negotiate to get out of the lease.
Okay. Another question that I had, and I said I will get some more of these answers, but trying to understand, and maybe this is publicly that they can help me with this, is we're going to go from 24,000 visits in this location, if that makes sense, Mike, 24,000 visits, and up to about 50,000 visits. I know we're going to add some specialties to this, but I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, are those visits already being done someplace else? That's what I wanted to ask you. Because you're going to add about 30,000 is what I'm going from 24 to 54,000 visits in this.
Yes and no, Supervisor, members of the board. The volumes that we're projecting are basically volumes that we as a system have looked at from a service standpoint, and specifically speaking of specialty services as an example. Right now we provide no specialty services on the East County. And what we do is we have patients scheduled into clinics on the west end of the county. Those visits right now are out in some instances 6 to 8 weeks. So what we're doing is we've reached a capacity level in which we, as a system, need to start providing those services on the east end of the county. One of two things happen with those patients. One is that obviously we are concerned about the quality of care because of the extended lengths of the consult visit, but we're also concerned about the travel distance and so forth. And in many instances, if they're unable to get the service within our system, they go elsewhere. So our ability to retain those visits and those services in the East County are crucial to our ability to maintain a comprehensive and quality healthcare system, as well as a financially viable system. Many of these patients are private payers where they, in fact, would have choices to go elsewhere. And if, in fact, they're seeing our primary care providers, our desire is to keep them within the system and provide that care locally.
So that's where we're going to, is that where we're getting most of these visits, is 30,000, or is it just a portion of them, and then a portion hopefully will come because people are here locally?
A large portion are specialty consults and visits.
That are coming from other locations, other places that we're already doing it.
Right, in which we have a backlog, in fact, of several weeks. In some instances, in some specialties, if you go by each individual specialty, which we have analyzed, neurology, we're looking several weeks out, which is not the standard of care.
Which is, I understand, trying to keep care. Now, when those people leave those other facilities and come to this new facility in Simi Valley, is that going to hit us with a cost that we're going to see revenues now in those places start to drop that give us a problem, or not?
No, and that's because we have a backlog. In other words, what we're trying to do is catch the system up. Right. So because we're 6 to 8 weeks out, our ability to then bring that number closer in terms of the visits, we don't expect there to be impact for our neurology services, our GI services on the west end of the county. So our services become more timely.
Okay. And do your clinics or this clinic receive some of the tobacco money at all? Settlement money, do you know?
We are in the process of allocating those dollars that typically come to the system, the account of contributions, tobacco settlement, and
that goes to clinics to help support some of these?
Those will be allocated to clinic to show the true financial fair performance of their operation.
Okay.
Yes.
Like I said, I'm going to meet with you later, so to go over some of this. So I won't ask all those other things. There's just a couple of things that I was just curious about. I mean, I'd love to be in business that I could go from this size to 130% increase and figure out how to do that real quick. I mean, it'd be great to understand that. So it was just trying to figure this out. But it sounds like you had a lot of services to do it. But all right, I'll ask those questions when we get together.
Great, thank you.
Supervisor Bennett?
I just want to clarify what I believe is the case. We're going from $1.90 a square foot to $2.50 a square foot. That locks us in for the next 15 years at $2.50 a square foot.
That's correct.
And in exchange for that, we're getting $3 million of improvements.
That's correct.
From the tenant in terms of this. Okay, great.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Do we have a motion on this?
It's in your district, but I'm happy to move it, but I don't want to.
Yes, please.
No, I was waiting for you.
You're waiting to do this, sign this lease, right?
That's correct.
Okay. The only problem I have with doing this, if something comes up out of our meeting that puts some real financial things that we didn't get to talk about publicly, I was wondering if that would be a problem for us all. Because, I mean, my concern is that we're showing a $400,000 loss in this and hoping a net operating income of $120,000 during the year for this $500,000. I'm just trying to figure that out. I just don't want to set us in a position that we're going to be losing an awful lot of money here, unless you think in our district that we have so much need. I'm just really concerned about that. I mean, and I'm also was hoping, because they're going to try to show us some pro forma on that, and maybe some other, I just may be out to lunch on this. Maybe we could hold it a week. I told you to go ahead and bring it. I just don't want to be in a situation that we make this long-term commitment and something happens. It just seems so big, unless you have some other.
I just have a question. What are the implications of holding it? Does that cause any problems for us in terms of negotiation?
No, the negotiations have been completed, and the lease has been signed by the owner of the property, the developer. So another week, is not critical in terms of the time frame. And there is an overall time frame for getting this going. It's just been a long time coming. We negotiated this lease over approximately 6 months. It was a lot of very difficult and heavy negotiations, especially over the issue of tenant improvements.
Okay, so that's one question, and then...
But, you know, I cannot say that a week is going to be a deal killer.
Okay. My other points, I mean, if a week's not a deal killer and you're asking for another week, but I do think that there's no question our system is the reason it's been able to be successful is because we've been able to keep our facilities in good shape and therefore be able to be out there and be attractive to people to be able to come in. And so there's sort of, you either cycle up or you cycle down in this in this business. And I think that we will find, I think what we've already found from at least conversations I've had is that there is significant demand in the East County, and that, you know, this rounds out our need to provide. We're trying to get primary care physicians to stay with us and be part of our system, and so we will need something there. And if you want to check the dollars on this, the other thing is, you know, my sense is the CEO and the healthcare agency have been pretty on top of these things when we've checked them out in the past. But I'm happy to wait a week if it doesn't cause any problem. But yeah, I'd love to hear what John has to say.
Mr. Johnson wants
Well,
to comment.
I'd like to ask the same question Supervisor Foy asked and see if I didn't quite hear the answer, or at least I think your concern is that there is this rise in the volume of business of about 130% if you go from the current visits to the projected visits. But of those projected visits, there is a sizable percentage of that is current business that is simply being shifted out to the East County and provided locally, improving the access, you know, the level of care. Can you tell us, or tell the supervisor, how much of the increase of that 130% is actually an anticipated increase in business as opposed to a shifting of business? Because that doesn't seem to be such a very large percentage, and maybe that's a more comfortable number than.
I'm looking at my numbers here. Of the 53,000 visits that we project in Performa, of course, 24,000 are existing visits. The increase of about 30,000 visits that we're looking at primarily come from the specialty services, in which we currently would be able to maintain. It's an existing spin-off of our existing family practice business. So we know that business is there. That's part of our confidence in these numbers. The other visits primarily are made up of urgent care visits. We provide no urgent care services as a county system in the East County. And we're talking about the access for Medi-Cal and self-pay patients, which are the majority of our patient population. So when we as a system have 70,000 visits annually in the East County, which we know is conservative in terms, and that's an actual performance, our ability to then be able to offer self-pay patients, Medi-Cal and others urgent care services are critical for two reasons. One is that, as we all know, that they end up using less of our valuable resource in the county, which is our emergency rooms, which is in East County. We're talking about Los Robles and Senior Hospital. So it provides a critical benefit to the entire county population in that we maintain that valuable resources for the needed services around emergency medical care. The second thing is that people typically end up delaying care or not seeking care if they don't have access to these emergent medical needs, urgent care. And so that compromises, from our perspective, our ability to provide quality health care to residents in the East County. In the West County, we have 3 urgent care centers, and give you a sense of, in terms of the demand on their services, in some situations we have 80 people showing up per day accessing our urgent care services. That's significant, knowing that typically in a typical practice you see maybe 30 patients, 30 visits a day. That's 2.5 times of what you would see in a normal practice that we're seeing at an urgent care facility on the West End. Those numbers, in terms of the projected Medi-Cal and self-pay population in East County, are no different if you were to extrapolate in terms of what the utilization levels would be.
And this is 10,000. Are you assuming that's what the total urgent care requirements are for the for that part of the county? Because right across the street on LA Avenue is an urgent care center right there. I mean, within 200 yards of this location, or 300 yards, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You would have to then look at
are we assuming they're going to leave that to come here? Is that part of that assumption?
Part of the assumption is that we know, you'd have to look at their payer mix, but we know what our payer mix is. And we're looking at primarily the Medi-Cal and self-pay population. Okay. And we do have people travel to the west end of the county to our emergency room for healthcare services.
Right.
So this is a matter of experience as part of our pro forma, but it's also hard numbers. And when, in fact, you inquired about is there science behind our numbers. Mm-hmm. What we do is we go from type of service, and specifically when you look at specialty, we go to endocrinology, GI, we look at wait time, we look at our system capacity, and then back into what we believe is a fair and conservative pro forma in terms of our ability to meet those numbers.
Right, right.
Our commitment to the East County has been there for several years now because we've seen these numbers ratcheting up in terms of demand. We were very fortunate to identify a partner, if you will, that was able to accommodate our request to include a little over $3 million in tenant improvement amortized throughout the lease. So we have, as a system, do not have that capital outlay. And at the same time, we were able to reduce our lease cost from the pure cost per square foot lease from $1.90 down to $1.35. So that difference, from our perspective, would go to help fund the additional tenant improvements that we have negotiated in the lease. And that's when Steve has mentioned that it's a very favorable lease, and it took difficult negotiations. Those were some of the nuances that we were looking at in achieving and bringing about this facility in the East County.
Is that what you're talking about? Basically, if we take the amortization cost out of the lease, it's $135.
Exactly.
In fact, there is a cost of living increase associated with this lease, but it's only with respect to the $1.35. And if we were going to a pure medical facility, a new medical facility that happened to be available, which there was none,
right,
go to this route, we would be added. There would be a cost of living associated with the total $250. So we were very pleased with that aspect of the negotiation.
Well, that's good. No, I do appreciate you guys are good at this lease stuff, and I've heard that, and we're working with you on our own stuff. So I mean, I do. You're good. You don't give anything away, so that's great to hear. I'm.
If you're comfortable and would prefer to get some more questions answered and wait until our next meeting to have this back before us, I'm sure that it will still be there. Yes.
I'll make a commitment to get my answers finalized so we can move on with this next week. I appreciate that.
If I could, just two things. I mean, just here, every time I've asked questions, and you're doing the right thing, asking the hard questions, but every time I've asked, I've been impressed with how for example, to negotiate the cost of living, but have that only be on the $1.35 is just another good example. I mean, by comparison, if we had to go out and try to do this on our own, this is certainly, I think, number one, a very attractive deal from that standpoint. The other thing I would point out is you've mentioned a number of times that both of you are interested in increasing services out there, and if I was looking at the county overall and saying, okay, if we're going to go out there, my own sense is, from the health of the county, this would be the first service I'd want to push out there before I push some other service, because it's so essential to the mission of Ventura County that we have by state law the mandate to take care of that health. And so, I think if we want to be consistent, if we want other services to come, this has to be there. Now, it doesn't mean we don't ask the hard questions, but I think I'll be surprised if we don't find that this is really the best way to expand that service out there.
Supervisor Flynn, comment?
Well, I just wanted to comment a little bit. I appreciate your comments and your questions, because you bring a different experience that we can learn from. So I really appreciate that. Also, I think the demographics in Ventura County are changing somewhat. And how much of a change, I don't know, but I think they are. If you look at my district probably has had an experience of having maybe 50% of the people in the county hospital come from my district. And I could go on and on with that. But a concern that I've had, and people in the East End have brought it to my attention, including both of you, is that we seem to have an imbalance here in services to the East End, and I hope that we can work on that, because the demographics, it seems, are changing, and work with you on that. Someone said to me, we hardly have any county buildings in the East End as opposed to the West End, and so somehow we're going to have to get over that, and it's going to mean bringing more services out there. But you bring a different light to shine on things than I do, and I learn from you.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
Just a question to staff. When you talk about the urgent care, and I don't even know who owns or operates that across the street, but one of the things that, as a public hospital, we take all folks who come into our emergency room. Our doors are open to all. And so I would expect the same is not true of urgent cares that are required to, or those that are perhaps owned by different entities. So to look at having an urgent care across the street that under our policy and mission and mandates is open to all, that one provides access, but then also, as you noted, provides the access keeping our costs contained, because it keeps them out of the emergency room in either a private sector hospital or even our own. True?
That's true.
I would just look also that these are going to have some specialists there that will be able to provide services that are important to be seen in a timely manner. If someone's found a lump in their breast or something, they don't want to wait for 3 weeks.
Right.
And we want to make sure on those things that need timely response, we don't have a huge waiting list. And obviously, we do have a waiting list on things that we don't meet the standard of care on. So I do support it in that sense, that we do need to, however we do it, we do need to make sure that we have the right standard of care. I also just wanted to point out that one of the things that keeps our health system alive is the fact that we have many of our county employees, members of that, choose that in their cafeteria plan to use our county facilities. And on the East County, well, obviously on the West County we have the hospital and a lot of clinics there. I think that might encourage other employees who live in the East County to enroll in that, and I think that that's a good thing. But I think overall we have to make sure that we do have the amount of services that we need to have. And when it comes to our whole budget in the county, when we have to realize that we might need to cut somewhere, there are other priorities out there too, and we want to make sure that what we decide to tighten our belt with are those things that may not be the life and death kind of things that are the most important.
More comment?
Yes.
I don't want to believe this, but I do want to say, because I do ask you a lot of questions, that I've been impressed with what I've seen and the quality of what you're doing, and your clinic system is wonderful, and we had a great tour of the hospital, and there's been some great things. So I just have to ask those questions, but I need to tell you that I have been impressed what you're doing and the great work you're doing, and some of the people are just, and I heard a great thing where somebody else said I was at the hospital down the road, and they told him, it was my father, my brother, that he'd just go home and die, and they came down to our hospital, and they saved his life, and some great things. So, I mean, just been some wonderful things. But again, I got to ask those questions. So thank you.
We really do all appreciate the questions.
Could I suggest that our motion just be that this be continued one more week with, and we put it into the motion with a commitment that we're going to do a yes or no vote next week, so that we don't have the lessor start to get nervous after all these 6 months of negotiations. They kind of go, now what's going on here? So, all right. So that'd be my motion.
Okay, motion and a second. Seeing no objection, then that passes. Thank you. Thank you for being here and responding. Our next item on the agenda then is our Public Works Agency. Am I correct? Let's see. Yes.
Watershed Protection.
Watershed Protection District.
Good morning,
Mr.
Chairperson
Sato.
Parks, Supervisors, Mr. Johnson. Before you today is the cost share agreement between the district and the city of Camarillo for work on the Camarillo's drain near the Camarillo Airport. The purpose of this project was to construct improvements to protect the Camarillo Airport and the properties north of the airport. Prior to the construction of this project, the airport had been managing this drain. It had about a 10-year capacity. and they had kept it clean of vegetation due to concerns by the FAA with birds near runway, flight paths, and that sort of thing. The original agreement between the City of Camarillo and the Watershed Protection District divided the work such that the city would prepare the plans for the project and administer the construction contract. The district was responsible for the construction inspection and then subsequently for the operation and maintenance of the facility. During the construction, there were a number of challenges that arose. Disputes with the contractor caused the construction contract schedule to be delayed by more than a year. Further, the high groundwater caused damage to the constructed access road and caused vegetation in what was before a clean low-flow channel to choke the new channel. The originally envisioned and permitted project by Fish and Game and others had the low flow kept clean of vegetation, and then next to the lower access road there was a native planted mitigation site on the terrace. Since the low flow is grown with vegetation has been choked, the higher velocities have been moved over the terrace and have caused damage to that area that is supposed to be planted with native vegetation. And by the way, the channel no longer has the 100-year capacity that had initially envisioned. The original contract with the city, because there was no vegetation in the low flow, did not have provisions to maintain that vegetation, any removals. The agreement before you reimburses the City of Camarillo for the removal of that vegetation as well as repairs to the access road. I would like to note that these items are for work that by the district staff were envisioned would be maintenance responsibilities. The city would pay for a number of other project efficiencies, including the restoration of that eroded terrace and the planting of that native vegetation. The estimated price of the district's suggested portion of work is $800,000 plus a 15% contingency for a total of $920,000. And I can answer any questions that you have.
Any questions on this? So there was some unanticipated work that needed to be done that's bringing forward this contract request.
Substantially, it's because of the length of time and the disputes with the contractor that occurred, that went on, and that the airport had been previously maintaining the low flow, so there was certainly no work to be done when that contract started.
And are there claims filed against the contractor?
No, there's no claims outstanding.
Not for delay or any of that?
The city administrated the contract, not the district. The district's role was to inspect the project. So the city, as far as I'm aware, the city has closed that contract.
Okay, because it's pretty complicated, but it sounds like the extended length of time due to the contractor caused these extra costs, and I'm just wondering if anyone's looking at trying to recoup those from the person who caused it.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. These were unanticipated situations. The high groundwater, no one anticipated, because of how clean the channel had been previously, no one anticipated that the vegetation would come back as vigorously as it did. But these items of work would have been responsibility during maintenance anyhow.
And isn't the groundwater a kind of a given? You can find out what your groundwater is before your project begins, so that's not, I wouldn't think it'd be too unexpected to find where the groundwater is. Obviously it changes a little bit with seasons, but I hate to hear a project is, we find that the groundwater level isn't what we thought it was, when it's something that you can check in advance now.
Yeah, no, you're right. We can check groundwater, and it was known. I think that the unknown was how vigorous the vegetation was to come back, and because of the disputes with the contractor, that the airport or others had not been in there to timely remove that vegetation as it began to grow.
Okay. Do we have any questions or a motion? Motion is second. Seeing no objections, that passes. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. We asked that 35 be continued, so we're not doing that item now, and instead our last regular agenda item is item 36. We have a motion and a second to receive and file. Now we do have our 10 a.m. now. Let's not forget that. This is our oral presentation from our county executive officer on our county budget.
Paul and I are going to do this morning is a refresher for those of you who've been on the board. It's new, and I presume
Okay, before we begin this very long presentation, let's take a 10-minute break, okay? We're taking a break. Okay, we'll come back into our session, our March 20th, 2007 Board of Supervisors meeting and our 10 a.m. time certain, which is a presentation by our CEO on our county budget.
Okay, this is one of my little fireside chats. As I have described it in the past, it says county revenues, we could entitle it How to Make a Small Fortune. And the answer always is to start out with a large fortune. And we're going to now shave this thing down to let you know how important or unimportant you folks are to the process of allocating county funds when you see how much is left. But this is kind of the beginning process and something that we go through on a regular basis in the budget office, trying to figure out where we are. And the big question that is asked frequently is, if you got a $1.5 billion, why is it that $10,000 here or $100,000 there is a big deal? And so that's what this is intended to remind us all of how money comes to the county, how it is restricted, how it can be allocated, and the limitations that are placed on your board. Your primary function as a Board of Supervisors is under the Budget Act to make these decisions every spring, and so it's more than just a ritual, but it's also the dilemma that we face. So we will get underway here with, let's see, I've got the right arrows. Is that the correct first slide? I'm getting, this is a surprise to me too. I didn't go over the slides ahead of time, but some of the things that we like to remind everybody about is what has been referred to as ballot box budgeting, and that is where somebody standing outside Kmart or Target or someplace in the rain gets your signature on a petition. Next thing you know, it's on a ballot, and then the voters think it's a wonderful idea. Nobody ever mentions the financial part of it, and you end up with things that have dramatic effects on what happens in local revenues. The first one up there isn't quite the one outside the the Target or the Walmart. This is the one that really was a revolution in California back in 1978, Prop 13. It placed a 1% limitation on property tax with a 2% growth per year. This is one of the things about our state that is pretty much unique. There are some other states who put on some restrictions, but here, because we live on the property tax as a local government, it substantially ties your hands as to your ability to raise new revenues, and a lot of people would say that's a good thing. We, out of 55 or 58 counties, last time we got numbers on this, we were about 55th in the state. That's a statistic I've given you before. That means that there are only 3 or 4 counties who collect less tax per capita locally than we do. So that's something I guess we could be proud of, in the sense that we don't tax our citizens as much as other places, but the other side of that coin is that we don't have as much per capita to deliver those services. And so when we get recognition of people like Liz Cameron today, and our fire service, and a number of the programs in this county, the healthcare system is a model in the state. It's kind of a tribute to your board and the local citizenry here that we're able to, with the dollars we have, deliver quality service.
And that's in part, is it not, to the fact that we don't have a lot of commercial retail in the unincorporated county, so we don't get as much sales tax as other counties?
Right. Local government, like city government, sales tax is a big issue for them, and that's where the cash registers are. That's kind of where the money goes. And because of our planning guidelines, we have restricted the way in which we do business, and business is done in the cities, and that means that the amount of sales tax that we collect is much smaller. That's, a restriction on us, but in the bad economic times, that's a good thing, because when the economy slumps and consumer confidence goes away, we're not heavily reliant on that one segment of the economy in order to produce local revenue. So everything has got a good and bad news story to it, but that is one of the reasons why we don't have as much influence over how much money is collected in the county, because we don't do those kinds of things in the unincorporated area that generate local revenues.
And that preserves the agriculture and the open space and all that, which is another good out of that.
That's right, yeah, the good side, quality of life, open space, greenery. Okay, so then we had the state lottery, and that was an issue to raise money for the school system. We had the voter-approved, let's see, what is Prop 62, Paul?
Any new local taxes have to be voter-approved.
Oh, is that like the GAN?
Yeah.
This is a restriction that if you want to raise money, you have to put it on the ballot and have everybody vote locally, where in the old days it used to be that city councils and boards of supervisors could actually levy the tax. So again, that's a kind of a good thing for us as taxpayers. We don't want legislative bodies to constantly raise the taxes. Prop 98 was one that said that 40 cents out of the dollar goes to K through 12 education in the state. That led to the state of California not being able to meet their obligations, and so they turned around and came up with something called ERAF, which is the Educational Realignment Act, and that took a lot of our property tax locally, took it to the state in order for them to pay their bills, further eroding your ability to pay for things locally. Then we came up with the tobacco tax limit to health care programs. This, if everybody, is that the right date, Paul?
Yeah, that's another tobacco tax. This isn't the...
Oh, okay, this is the one, yeah, okay, this was the supplantation issue at the state, where they put an initiative on, they raised the money, and then the money that was raised had to go to specific programs, in this case, health care. Prop 163 eliminates the snack tax. Does that no sales tax on? There was an erosion. Even, again, a good thing for us because we don't have much sales tax, but the cities had a problem with that. Prop 172 was an effort to replace the general fund taxes that you lost under property because of the ERAF and Prop 98. So they said you could vote locally to assess a tax called the public safety tax, and we did it. And then we further restricted it to be used only for, I think, 4 agencies out of public safety, whereas many jurisdictions did it and had it much broader. So, part of that was done we did that to ourselves, but mostly it was because what was general fund tax that you could have spent for anything became 172 tax, which could only be used in the public safety area. And then Proposition 218 limits local government's ability to impose property tax related fees and assessments and charges. Is that the GAN limitation? Paul?
No, it just requires the vote of the people in order to raise a tax.
Okay, and then somewhere, which I don't know, maybe it's on the next slide. Do we have GAN up here?
No, GAN was maybe part of Prop 13.
Yeah, well, actually, there was a follow-up on that, but the GAN initiative that said that governments cannot charge more in fee for service than what it costs to provide the service, which is a great concept, but if you think of it from a business standpoint, you can only break even. You can never win. And if you don't break even, you lose. And that's kind of what the way the voters like it. Here we got Prop 10. This was a tax that was levied on tobacco, and it was restricted to childhood development programs. Then there was Prop 36, which the voters voted in, saying that they wanted to have treatment instead of incarceration. It did not come with revenue, and so the state of California has been funding that, but that's constantly an issue that is in play as to whether or not the state will continue to do it. If the state does not provide that money, Prop 36 still says we have to divert and go to treatment rather than incarceration, which means it'll become another burden on your limited local property tax. Prop 42, sales tax on gasoline directed to transportation. As we go through this, you kind of get the idea. But here's the one point where we sort of struck back. Local government and the local citizens realized that what was happening is the state of California, every time they had a problem, it became our problem. And there was not much you could do about it because we are an arm of the state. But the cities and the counties joined together, and Prop 1A was very well supported by the taxpayers, who said that the state should not just every time they have a problem reach down and take the local money. And then once we have Prop 63, which was another tax that recently came into effect, but again, it's only available to mental health expansion. So the purpose of going through that is, and this is, kind of, it's the major restrictions, but it's only a partial list of how money that you are budgeting out of $1.5 billion is not really money that there's a lot of latitude on. So then we go to the tobacco settlement ordinance, which we enacted, and that restricted the use of the settlement money that we received when we sued the tobacco industry for the damage and cost to the local government as a result of the tobacco products. That is was a 25-year estimated payout. We started out getting $10 million. That's an ever-shrinking amount of money, and your board has made a commitment to the community that it will only be used for health care, so it's not available for other general purposes. We have the SOAR initiative, which limitates growth, and that affects assessed value, but again, it's a quality of life issue for us in the county.
I might point out that some people would say it just limits where growth takes place, not the amount of growth, but...
Right. There are a lot of opinions on it, but the effect of it is a way in which of limiting and planning our growth, the secondary orderly growth. We were one of the pioneers in the state where we had the guidelines for orderly development, which is to say that if you're going to have an urban development, it should be in an urban area or it should be next to a city. And so we've done a really good job in that regard, but it does create, certain constraints on your board's ability to finance the unincorporated government and the general services. And then we have the one that we're pleased to say has been resolved both in the courts as well as here locally by an agreement under the public safety, where Prop 172 money, originally the ordinance said that the public safety was to be funded at the current level plus whatever inflationary undefined pressures there were, and that the public safety budgets in this county were growing 10% a year, and basically it was kind of eating up the rest of the budget. That has been pretty much worked out, but we still have the limited funds to pay for everything, including public safety. So here is the large fortune. The total county revenue projection was 1.5 or 1.541, and you can read the rest of the decimals. That's how much money we expected to take in. Of that, non-general fund revenue, close to $700 million of it, and that's in your special districts, your fire district, your flood control district. I guess I've got a list here of the various areas where that's restricted. You have your non-general fund, the enterprise, the airports, the harbors, the libraries. There are a variety of areas where we take money in, and it is to be spent only for those purposes. So when you subtract that out, you then get to what we call our general fund, which is $800 million, almost $842 million. And then we, out of that money, we have direct program revenue, and those are basically revenues, whether they be grants, subventions, fee for service, monies that are collected for specific purposes, and they go immediately to those areas. So we subtract that out, and now we've got a general fund that has got general purpose revenue of less than $300 million, having started up here. And it's not over yet. The beat goes on. And we call it discretionary revenue. We're trying to figure out what discretion do we have, and it keeps shrinking. So we're here, this is general purpose revenue. That's the number from the last page. And then we have like debt service, that is interest on loans, that has to be paid to the lenders. Then we have public safety ordinance, and the public safety ordinance requires that you spend $142 million a year just on the public safety. In addition to that, we have the pension obligation bonds that we've talked about in previous meetings. In the public safety area alone, there's $7 million due this year. And so we have added that out of your general fund to the public safety budget in order to pay those off, and next year those will go away. And then it says public safety additional. Paul, what's that one?
That's beyond the 4088 requirement.
Oh, okay. This is the amount of money that we are funding public safety in excess of the settlement agreement. Your board agreed with the key public safety departments into what we call a formula-based entitlement, and so there's a mathematical computation based on the economy, based on what they received before, and when it's all worked out, your board, in addition to doing that, has come up with roughly $3.5 million more, plus $7.5 million more to cover those pension bonds. So in total, you're about $11 million above the entitlement level. Which is a good indication of the priority that you place on public safety. And it also is a good indication that if times get really tough, your board has that flexibility when we say, share the gain and share the pain. When it goes down, this is the area where you will have some flexibility to reallocate. We've got indigent legal services at $9 million. That's a constitutional requirement. What's direct aid, Paul?
That's HSA, direct aid.
Oh, yeah, through the Human Services Agency. And these are heavily leveraged dollars, are they not?
No, those are just our cost of the match,
Right.
Yeah, they are heavily leveraged.
Yeah, because we pay like 6 cents on a dollar. So we get a lot of service locally for that amount, but that is locked up and you do have to put it there. Then we have something we call terminations, buy-down, and retiree health, which is the way in which we account centrally for the cost of those items. And then by the end of the year, those get spread out to the departments that cover the differences in what was allocated under salaries and what you have to pay as people terminate the cash-in buy-down, the retirees' health program, the different contributions. Building and maintenance, this is the cost to maintain your physical plant throughout the county. And then we have a thing called contributions to other funds, which are a variety of numbers that we have in there. Paul, you want to?
BCMC is the primary one.
Yeah, how much of that is BCMC?
5.6 of that is BCMC.
Okay, so that is our contribution for the health safety net out of the general fund. And then we have building, let's see, what do we have? We're down here to in-home support services, the public authority. You may recall that the state of California enacted a law, I don't know if that's got federal overtones or not, but the state requires us to be the employer of record for purposes of salary negotiations. And these folks that provide in-home health care services are represented by SEIU, and this is the portion that we pay locally. The state puts up some money, and we have in our labor contracts, we indicate that we will do this much as our share, depending on what the state of California does. And that also ties in with your board's policy regarding minimum wage and health care of $10, or maybe it's up to $11 an hour now.
I think it's 11. The state will cover up to 11.60.
Yeah, but what is our minimum? Yeah. Yeah, so we pay that, and this is one of those complicated things that it's a combination of local partnership, state of California, and the idea is to keep people in their homes for as long as they can stay in their homes, keep them out of hospitals and institutions, and there is an overall savings to the society, but your share as a partner is this much, and it's an obligation, so we have to subtract that. So now we've got a total of $212 million in non-discretionary costs that we have to subtract from what we call general purpose revenue. And now we're getting close to what theoretically you folks have something to say about, and it's just a little less than $80 million, having started out with $1.5 billion. But it's
Do we have a breakdown somewhere that shows the amount of money that we put in to get matches? For example, so many of the funds that we put in with our Human Services Agency, we put in a very small amount and get big matches from state and federal. I was wondering if maybe at some point there might be some document prepared that gives us an idea on that. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm sure the budget office has to track that. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask you a quick question? Out of this contribution to other funds at $12,000,008 and 8.6 to VCMC and all other places, you say that we have to make those, or that's our discretion just to make those, even though we've been making them?
Well, you have an obligation to fund the safety net, and that is the way in which we currently fund it. If we had a different model, that number could be twice as much, or maybe if it's rationed care, it could be less than that. Okay. Circumstances became awful. That number would be, let's say we had a depression and when there was no money, that you would continue to prioritize and decide how best you would spend your dollars. And if that had to come down a few dollars, then the way in which it is balanced in effect is a reduction in access to care. Right. The only other way it comes down is the question that you've asked in the past, which is what are the alternate models of delivering the safety net? That's...
Right. Because some of those other things were fixed that we had to pay. We didn't have that kind of flexibility with some of the other things in there, right? Well, building maintenance, I guess we could, don't have to do some maintenance, but
Yeah, you
but it
can
sounds
kid-
like that.
you can kid yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right, yeah,
and-
there's some of those we're going to have to pay.
Right.
And then out of that, maybe, Paul, there's another $4 million, it sounds like, that just goes to other things besides the hospital.
Well, there was $1 million contribution to the help, to the harbor, for the restroom.
Could you go back one slide while we're having this talk, I think?
And then also, if it's possible to come on microphone, Mr. Dursey.
Right. And we can get into the detail on all that. The purpose this morning was just to kind of get you down to where the key, what people think of as local discretionary general fund money.
Right.
But as you sort back through it, when you go through the budget process, all this stuff will be on the
Yeah.
table, and there will be a breakdown for each category, and you could say, well, let's see, how much building maintenance do you want to do?
Well, I guess what I was trying to say is when we said, because these are kind of discretionary revenues, but some of them are really fixed, we almost can't touch, and some of them are a little bit flexible to a sense. We've kind of made decisions not to touch them,
Right.
but there is some flexibility in there.
We'll probably change the chart, because this bothers me too. We say discretionary revenue at the top. That is kind of the subject that we were, or what we're attempting to do is to define that.
Right.
But none of this is discretionary in that sense, and yet I guess in one sense it's all discretionary. But when we get to the very end of it, we'll pull that together for you. But all of these numbers have a breakdown for them by category, and you'll receive all that information as we go through the budget, and then we'll discuss the assumptions that are being used and whether or not your board, accepts the assumption or wants to try something a little different.
Okay. Yeah.
John, can you identify what fiscal year we're talking about with these?
The current fiscal year.
Current, thank you.
And since we're still in the current fiscal year, these are still estimates as to how much money we're going to ultimately get in and how much money we're ultimately going to spend. It's getting a little clearer because we're now, moving into the last quarter of the fiscal year. But Paul has it up here as discretionary with a question mark, because of that $79 million that's left, that theoretically is discretionary. Look what you have to pay for, and you may not want to think of yourselves as discretionary. Some voters may. We got the assessor, we've got the auditor, we've got the board of supervisors, we've got me. A lot of people think I'm discretionary, or indiscretionary. The Civil Service Commission, the county clerk recorder, county council, treasurer, ag commissioner, animal control. There isn't anything on that list that people wouldn't say, are got to haves. And the question is how much do we spend on it? And so that's where your discretion comes in, as there is a mandate to provide all of these things pretty much, and yet you don't have to provide it at a particular level. So it gets down to a prioritization of how much money do you have and where that falls into the pecking order. So in the end, when you receive a budget, the frustrating part for those who have served in the past is that you say, okay, now where's the discretion? Where's the extra money? And sort of being of sound mind, I spend it all for you when I propose the budget. And I say, well, this is kind of where we think we are. And then you guys get the opportunity to either say, well, okay, it makes some sense to us, or no, we want to get the knife out and go deeper, or no, we want to be a little more wishful in our thinking, and we hope that we could spend less money on facilities maintenance, and we can spend a little more money someplace else. And so that kind of a discussion goes on. But generally speaking, the outlook that we are confronted with...
Before you leave that one, the Farm Advisor Office, money comes from other sources also, University of California.
Right. This is just the amount of money that we put out.
Yeah.
The substantial portion...
So it's kind of a substantial portion comes from other sources.
Yeah, we're a small partner in the deal. So from a dollar standpoint, we get a lot of service for very few dollars. So when I came to you last week and we talked about this gap between what we think the revenues will be and what we believe the cost of current services at next year's prices will be, I told you that the existing services we thought were about $4.5 million more expensive than what we think we're going to get in revenues. And I had identified, based on your board's discussion over things in public safety, the Guardian's office, maybe another couple of $1 million. So I was thinking maybe the gap was about $6 million. The this is kind of a roller coaster, and I'll try not to do this to you every week, but, you know, it gets better and it gets worse, and it gets better and it gets worse depending on what we get in the morning's mail and who we've met with that day. It looks to me like that since I met with you last, that we're probably another $2 million going the wrong direction, that we're up to about more like $8 million out of whack right now. Some of that is in unrealized revenues, particularly in RMA, as we talked about. The building slowdown has affected their revenues. We have the tobacco settlement report came out, and we are going to receive, I think I sent you a note on it, I think we're going to receive like $1.6 million less in this fiscal year than what we budgeted. Fortunately, we have a set aside that your board, you know, put for the rainy days so that we wouldn't have to, you know, grant certain money and then take it back during the mid-year, so we can finish this year out. But next year, the number, I think we'll have, what, 1.3 million less next year?
In the current year, but actually 1.7 less than what we had already estimated.
Okay. It's say $1 to $1.5 million less tobacco settlement money will be available. Now, that money has been pledged to healthcare programs only. But you have $500,000 out there in the community and nonprofit organizations that are receiving grants, and you have how much? I think like about $800,000 of it is coming to the county, the public health department, the mental health department, the hospital. So if all of those jurisdictions, including our jurisdiction, don't have that money, the nonprofits will have to figure out another source for their income. And your healthcare system has taken an $800,000 hit, which will have to be made up in some fashion, or will have, well, in some fashion, which is either reduction in service levels or increase in revenues and some. So those are the kinds of things that go on week to week. We also had a discussion with the sheriff's office, and there was a difference in the assumptions they were making versus the ones we're making. I come to your board on a regular basis and talk about how we reach the level of sustainability, which means that, or at least the intention is, we have had as a goal to spend no more in a fiscal year on operating expense than we take in current income, living within our means. But that was a moving target, and when we said we were going to be at a sustainable level, we were still above that, and as we were coming down, we did not want to see layoffs in areas of public safety. We had a huge investment in the training. We also difficult to recruit, plus the service to the community. So what we did is your board approved a bridge loan, so to speak, that said we're going to give public safety a little more money so that they will have a chance to get down to the sustainable level. Well, as any good manager will do, is they were coming in for a soft landing, and suddenly things looked better. They gave it a little gas, and off we went. So we really, in the public safety area, didn't get down entirely to that sustainable level. Now, that's something that we'll cope with. That was just kind of a model that we were using. But the effect of it is that they were operating from a base that was about $2 million higher than we are, and then compounding that with the cost of inflation. So if I add that into the gap, it's even a larger gap than the $8 million. But the budget office and the sheriff's office believe that they can reconcile a lot of those numbers, and so right now I'm thinking $8 million out of balance is about where we are. And we still got a couple of months to work through that, and hopefully we'll get some good news along with the bad news, and we'll have a balanced budget for you.
One of our policies has been to be very careful about starting new programs with one-time only money.
Right.
Because then we're stuck holding the bag if that one-time only money goes away. And I'm just wondering with the tobacco allocation funds if that should be looked at as in a more cautious light in terms of the fact that it is being reduced, and yet we have programs that rely on it.
Well, the way in which your board, the current caution that we've used is that we set aside about $17 million, started out at about 15, and I guess with interest and what have you, it's up to around, I believe, 17, is that right? And that's in a designated fund, and that is your soft landing cushion. But you're right, you're going to have to view that as a declining revenue source, and eventually it will go away. I don't know, what year are we in now, Paul, since the settlement? Are we in the 10th year yet? Or?
No, we're a year away after this year 9 coming up.
Okay, well, tempus fugit. Time goes pretty fast. You know, we'll be 10 years into this, and it was originally a 25-year settlement payout, which seemed like a long time and a steady source of income. Well, you got about 15 years roughly after this budget's adopted, and so when we come to you at budget time, that'll have to be one of the considerations. One of the problems that you have, and we knew we would get there one day, is we tried to use some of that money to help support innovative community-based ideas and not just have the government run it. But when you run a healthcare system that is considered to be a model in the state, and it still runs at a deficit because we get all the non-paying clients, not all, but most of the non-paying clients, and we are receiving money from the state and federal government, Medi-Cal, you know, the big payments, for us to be the recipient of donations and turn around and then out of our largesse decide we're going to donate to somebody else is a little bit of a contradiction, and you're going to have to cope with that in the spring because that money is not likely to go back up.
Thank you.
That's it for today.
Oh, you know I have to have a question or two, right?
Absolutely. I'd be disappointed if you didn't.
I guess future you're going to give us in the budget, like you said, more of those details of what some of the pieces are we look at and what we support and what we don't support. This sounds like $8 maybe to $10 million deficit is what you're looking at?
No, I'd say 8 right now.
8 right now? Because every week you come, it gets a little bigger.
Well, I'm hoping that by next week we'll see it level off and start the other direction. We know that we can do something about it, so it's...
Yeah. Okay. And then, so our revenue, besides the tobacco revenue, it's more of our expense side has been up, or our revenues are coming down that what we thought were there? Is that what?
Well, definitely your expenses are going up. You just figure, you know, we're driven substantially by payroll.
Right.
We're a labor-intensive service organization, so expenses are rising. Income is still rising, but not as fast as those expenses. One of the ways in which you balance a budget, if we can get it this close, is the assumptions we're making. And the assumption I'm making when I give you these numbers is what we did this year at next year's prices. We have to go back and look at what we did this year and see what are those things that maybe can be shaved or deferred. And at some point, you just don't want to kid yourself. Right. You don't want to balance a budget by saying, well, let's see, I got $1 million more in expenses than I thought. I'll just wish myself an additional $1 million in income. Right. If it doesn't come in, you know,
that's right. But we should also be looking at this because we're still enjoying the revenues of the increase in the property tax, right?
Sure.
We still haven't seen the downturn in the property tax yet.
Yeah, or the leveling off.
Or the leveling off.
And
so our revenues in the middle of next year or towards the end of next year will really start to show us in that. It would probably December's payments in 2008.
I think
about 18 months.
I think it's about an 18-month cycle normally where we'll not really feel much of it, and we'll start to see it, and then we just have to keep anticipating, you know, what the effect is when they estimate the increase in the size of the assessed value growth. We know that, you know, based on Prop 13, there's a 2% annual on the existing. The rest of it is, you know, remodel, development, reassessment as a result of Prop 13 sales. So it'll take a while for it to sort out, and so we shouldn't think of it as being, you know, kind of slam the brakes on. It's a horrible situation, but we need to recognize we have to slow down.
One more comment. The lien date's already been set, so that's January 1 for next year's property tax cycle. So those numbers, as far as those dollars, have been locked in already. So, and then it takes the assessor from now until July 1 to make sure that everything's good in their system, and then we come up with the tax roll. So we're expecting the rates to be pretty solid still
for this year,
next fiscal
year.
Subsequent years where we may see a leveling off, and our projections in the out years have come back down a little bit in that regard.
Okay, but we also know that this machine keeps eating, so it's going to grow with that leveling off. So part of my, I guess my thought process is we have to be cautious what we're doing here versus let's put this off, because at that point we have a bigger drop that we have to cut some. Okay. Thank you.
The danger is always, to straight line, projections, annualizing last week's sales. If they were good, you're rich. If they were not so good, you think you're broke. You got to kind of wipe that out of your mind and look at what the realistic numbers would be, and then decide how much risk you want to take.
I was just thinking that pension obligation bonds are going to be finally paid off too, so we'll be able to get some relief, don't you think?
Right. All of that is in the forecast as we present it to you.
That might help us at least in the balance with the lower property tax revenue that we're anticipating.
That's our hope. This year, we thought we were going to get a little breathing room because we knew that half the pension bond payment was going to go away. But what happened was we've now been told that because of the reevaluation of the demographic information the actuary did, they said, now your cost of pensions just went up 12 while the pension bonds went down. So the good news is we kind of broke even, and we didn't take a drop, but we didn't have that extra headroom that we were hoping for.
Supervisor Flynn?
Just make an observation. I was on the board when we did have to adopt property tax increases or decreases. And every time we did that, either way, it was headlines in the paper. What's substituted for much of that, some of that, is fees increase. But fees never make really the headlines in the paper. They get lost on page 16. So it's kind of an observation.
That's true. We used to have a room full of people, remember, when they would pin tea bags to their lapels and show up here as a symbol of their early roots of rebelling against the king. So the good part of that, not having to set the tax locally, is we no longer have the local fight. The bad part is that if you as a citizen want to have an influence on things, you got to go to Sacramento, which is a long drive to be heard. And even those of you who serve full-time in these positions find it difficult to be heard in Sacramento when you...
Supervisor Floyd?
In this budget process, you're thinking at some point we're going to start setting aside money because it sounds like we have a jail that's going to be having to come online. Is that part of what this process is, or it's not contingent in that budget?
It is part of the process of getting your board to start thinking about how would you do that. And, a lot of it's a policy question as to how soon you think you're going to do it and what you're going to do. We started last year trying to make that place in the budget. And in effect, the cost of salaries to recruit and retain qualified officers, deputies, that money ended up going right into the public safety budget. So as I've had talks with the sheriff, that they're their own strongest competitor for these dollars. If we appropriate it today for today's safety, it's not going to be there next year and the year after when the jail comes online. And so that's not an argument not to continue to support today. That the sheriff and the public safety segment just have to recognize that when that happens, it'll have to be managed within the limited resources that we have. It's not like there's someone going to give us an inheritance, that there'll be a windfall from someplace. So your board gets to discuss that as a policy as to what you want to do.
It's one thing to build something, it's quite another to staff it.
Right.
Well,
sometimes those two aren't brought together.
Right, and that's the big thing. But we're kind of getting to a point mandated to do this here pretty quick, aren't we?
Well, I think the pressures are pretty clear that that we do need to start making the next step in dealing with the local overcrowding problem. And Sacramento seems to be giving us a much larger challenge by saying you're going to keep people longer. So a lot of the thinking we've already gone into, or we put into the overcrowding situation has to be now rethought and added to, depending on what Sacramento does.
Right.
Some of that will come with money, and that's the good part, but it won't help us with our local responsibilities.
Well, okay. I guess so at some point we're going to have to add that to this budget and start working it, because
have to decide
going from here to there instantly isn't going to be possible, I don't think.
Right.
Something's going to be
well, it's very painful if you do it suddenly.
Yeah.
But we do anticipate borrowing for that one.
For the construction
Certainly.
part, but your operating
Certainly.
expense, you'll have an ongoing debt service on what you borrowed, plus you'll have an operating expense to actually open it up and staff it.
Do you know what that is?
Well, the original thinking was that to just solve Little Ventura County's problems, that over the next 3 or 4 years, we were in the design phase this year, and maybe over 3 or 4 years, we'd eventually build on the existing footprint about an $80 million wings or someplace else in the county, depending on what your board decided, and that additional $80 million in debt, plus the cost to operate what was constructed, we thought was going to be something in the neighborhood of $23 to $25 million a year ongoing. Right, which we're not currently paying for. Because the two things we told you last year, and we tell you every time I get up here to do my dance, is that you've got the hospital retrofit issue that needs to be kept in mind, and you have the jail expansion that needs to be kept in mind, plus the hospital wouldn't have much operating expense other than debt service, but clearly the jail, the bad experience in LA, when I was down there, they had something they referred to as the Twin Towers, and it sat empty for almost 2 years because they couldn't staff it. And then when we built our juvenile justice detention facility, the state got a little wiser, and they said, we're going to give you guys, what was it, a $40 million grant? Whatever it was, and we built a $60-70 million facility out there, but they would not give us the money, their share of the money, and pay us and reimburse us until we had the staffing to run it. And so, and we had, that was a struggle to do that, but it's doable. You just don't do it over 1 year. You have to phase it in.
Be nice if we could get a $40 million grant to do the jail also, right?
Well, yeah, it would be. My fear is that they're going to give you a $40 million, or they may give you a $200 million grant, but that won't be quite enough to build the rooms or cells just for what the state's going to send to us, and we're going to still be stuck with ours. But, I make a living by being a pessimist, so let's hope that doesn't happen.
All right, any other questions on this? Thank you for the report. Do we have a motion to receive and file? Thank you. I don't recall that in our agenda review we pointed out that item 28, our 1:30 time certain, has been continued to April 3rd. So let me just make a point of that now. And then right now we're going to go from our regular meeting to our closed session meeting. And do you anticipate any announcement from that, County Council?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Thank you. All right, so we will then adjourn from our closed session and see you at our next board meeting.